Good evening and welcome to the April 17th meeting of the Town of Los Angeles Grove Town Council. If we could have the roll call, please.
Councilman Bolsonen.
Here.
Councilman Jarrell.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rocket.
Here.
Councilman Leanne.
Here.
Mayor Brown.
Here. If we would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Heavenly Father, again, we ask for wisdom and guidance. We pray for the rains, and just as long as we don't get a hurricane. And give us a great night tonight. We pray in your name. Amen. All right. Any changes to the agenda?
I'd like to add under new business, make it a C, and discussion of OJM repair and maintenance of Compton Road, Ryan Road, North Deck Road, and Wasilla.
Okay. OJM
Repair and maintenance.
repair and maintenance. Okay. Okay. Any other additions? No, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as changed.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as is.
Okay. Ryan makes a motion. Second by Ryan. Okay. Any further comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. We're going to have the roadways, trails now before the consent agenda, or do we need to switch that? Okay. All right. So we have the liaison for the roadway, equestrian trail, and greenway advisory committee. Tom, is this where we're selecting one?
Right.
Yes, one was never selected,
Oh, okay. Okay.
so we need a motion to appoint.
Okay.
And let me give Tom a brief. Tom wasn't here, but I personally felt like Tom would be a good one for the Equestrian Trails Committee because of his background with environmental and the other stuff. So I recommended at our last meeting that we appoint him to be the liaison, but he hadn't had a chance to accept it yet.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll say it.
Second by Jim. All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Congratulations. All right, moving to the consent agenda. Any changes in that? Jan?
I have one change on the February 7th meeting minutes, page 6. Under public comment, Nina Corning, 2838 Road, expressed that she was, and I'm inserting the word not pleased, that horse trails were not being considered in the bond.
All right.
Is there a page number?
Yeah, page 6.
6 of
And
10.
it's in the, yeah, it's in the middle, towards the middle of the page.
Boy, that changed everything, didn't it? There you go. Okay. All right. And any others?
Not that I know.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll make that one.
Okay, Ryan makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ron. Further comments, discussions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving to presentations. We have one from Patricia Christensen, Waste Pro.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Patricia Christensen. I'm the Municipal Marketing Manager for Waste Pro. With me this evening is our Division Manager that oversees your contract for solid waste and recycling services, Pete Riley. I was invited here tonight after a discussion with Mr. Cutney in regards to the possibility of Waxahachie Groves going to automated services for their solid waste. I don't want to come across some way, do you know what automated services are? It's when you have a 95-gallon cart, that's similar to that, that's put out the curb rather than regular 35 or 45-gallon trash cans. You receive the same service level, twice a week service, and then your recycling, yard debris, and bulk pickups would remain the same. And I was asked to talk about the pros and cons. Just a little bit about my background. I used to be a council member for the city of Port St. Lucie for almost 20 years, and deliberated many times as to whether we wanted to do automated services in Port St. Lucie. There's 68,000 residential units. And one of the things that you would see a change in is the level of service. With the type of service that you currently have in Loxahatchee roads, you have a garbage truck running down the streets, and they're picking up the garbage and they're picking up the bulk goods at the same time. When you go to fully automated services, you would have what we call a one-armed bandit truck. It's an automated truck. You have a driver in that truck, and he'd be going from house to house, picking up that 95-gallon cart. He would not be able to pick up anything else that wasn't in that cart, which then would require an additional pickup of any of the bulk goods or anything else that's left outside that cart, depending on what those items are. One of the things that we discussed, Pete and I and our folks back at our regional office, was if you were serious about considering automated services, that there's a compromise. We offer what we call semi-automated services. Semi-automated, again, would still provide you the 95-gallon cart, but rather than the truck having the automated arm, it would be picked up with a tipper that would still be on the back of our rear load trucks. The advantages to that, when somebody leaves out a large item, a mattress or a sofa or whatever, they'd still be able to pick that bulk item up with the same truck. If there's additional items, if maybe the resident had maybe cleaned out their garage or whatever and had more debris that didn't fit in the 95-gallon cart, we would still have the ability to pick that up. One of the things that you don't want is garbage left at the curb. And unfortunately, when you go to a fully automated service, not only do you have the education and transition for the residents to get used to that type of service, but a lot of times they won't be able to put everything that they need to in that 95-gallon cart. And they'll either hold it back in their garage or alongside their house for their next pickup that week, or they'll put it out hoping that we pick it up. But with that one-armed automated truck, we wouldn't have the capability, because that driver is going to be sitting in that driver's seat and operating that arm, and he doesn't get out of the truck because the truck actually dumps into the side. With the semi-automated services, the helper that would still be on the back of the truck has the ability to take the additional debris. So your streets are still going to remain clean after that garbage pickup. Some of the other things that we had talked about was, again, getting the residents to understand when you go to, whether you would go fully automated or you go semi-automated, the training or the transitioning of getting those residents to know how to put those carts out. They have specific needs of having to be put out a certain distance from the road, certain distance from obstacles like mailboxes or parked cars or utility poles. They have to be 3 foot from the road and 5 feet away from any other obstacle like the mailbox or the utility pole, so that they can be picked up. Again, that's with the fully automated arm. With the semi-automated, you don't necessarily have that, because you're still going to have the driver staying in his truck, the helper's still on the back of the truck. He gets off just like he would now and just walk over, wheel the cart over to the back of the truck and tip it. And again, the advantage is not only will he be able to pick up any bulk items that's not there, but if anything falls out of the cart, and and I can almost guarantee you on a windy day, you'll see something like that happen. He will be able to pick that litter up also. In the fully automated, that arm dumps that cart into the side of the truck, and he's not going to, there's still litter debris that may occasionally fall out, but he's not going to be able to get out and pick that up. So obviously you can tell I'm pro semi-automated. Semi-automated has its advantages, but it's really, the advantages really come into play if the municipality is doing their own garbage service, because it's a budget savings for them. They don't have to work with comp issues that they would normally have if they have helpers on the back of the truck. It's a little bit faster service, so they're able to get routes done quicker and a little bit more efficiently. But again, if you do a cost comparison or a comparison of the municipalities that have automated services versus those that don't, it's really the cities that are looking to save money where the majority of the automated services are. Now, I know there are cities, Wellington being one of them, that does have fully automated, but again, it's a very compact city. You know, they have neighborhoods where you're spread out a little bit more. So in addition, you don't have necessarily all paved roads. So the roads are probably not as wide as theirs, where when you've got carts across the street from one another and they're out in the roadway, you have the issue of having to dodge them. The semi-automated allows you to still keep that cart at the edge of the driveway, and the helper gets out and pulls that cart over to the truck and then wheels it back over to where you picked it up. So hopefully you're getting the picture as to the pros and cons, and if you have any questions, please interrupt me. I have a tendency to ramble on. But again, you know, we're here at your pleasure. We enjoy serving the city of Waxahachie Groves, and we're going to continue serving it.
Okay. Any questions? Ron?
Sure, go ahead. The request was made for you guys to give us a fact update, if you will, because of interest in what it might do in terms of savings. And of course, any service level changes. Do you anticipate the semi-automatic to provide any potential savings for our service costs?
Yes. What I explained to Martin just before the meeting started, in a meeting with our regional vice president, we don't like putting our prices out there publicly right now, not knowing if you're going to go out for bid on this contract or if it's something that you would consider negotiating with us as an extension to your current contract. But what I assured Mark was that whatever you chose, there would not be a rate increase. Depending on the service you chose, I could almost guarantee there would be a rate decrease. The other issue is if you chose to go semi-automated or automated, the prices that we discussed late this afternoon would also include the carts. I know Pete had mentioned that you would consider buying the carts yourself, but we have carts already in stock, and all we do is design the sticker that would go on your carts. So, and again, the carts are included in the prices. But there would be no rate decrease. Your current rate that you have right now, if you stayed with the service that you currently have, would remain the same. If you went automated or semi-automated, there would be a rate decrease. And I can tell you semi-automated would be lower than automated. And the reason being, currently in Palm Beach County, we don't have any automated services in the municipalities that we serve. It would require us to purchase a truck with that automated arm. And because you would be the only city or town that we would be servicing, the truck basically would be sitting idle for 4 days a week because we would only be using it to pick up your town 2 days a week. So that's why there would be a difference in the cost between automated and semi-automated.
If I understand you correctly, then the total cost to the town, which you would put in your contract charge for the year, monthly fee, whatever you want to look at, including the 95-gallon containers would not go up.
Correct.
And you're suggesting it goes down?
If it went to semi-automated,
Yes.
yes. If it went to automated, it would go down slightly, not much.
Okay. Now, we have a little education process to go through, and with the automated, it seems like more forgiveness with the process of education over time. Do you see any level of service increase with the semi-automated? Or the same? Would you say the same?
I think you would probably have the same level or in peak. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, the difference between semi-automated and what you currently have is we're going to provide your residents with a 95-gallon cart that all of their solid waste will go in. They'll still have their recycling bins for recycling, and they'll still put their yard waste out and their bulk items out the way they do right now. So the only change they would actually see is the type of container that they put their garbage out in. So the bulk items, again, would be picked up at the same time that their solid waste containers are picked up.
All right, I understand that this is a possible benefit to the town where we have sometimes an issue with more usage than average as far as waste, and we would have a limitation that you would only pick up one 95-gallon cart at each stop. You would not take anything else that would be considered waste, and you would not take two, let's say two 95-gallon carts without some adjustment to the rate that they might pay?
I think that's something that we can work with the town on, that if a resident needed to, and I'm not sure, maybe Mr. Cuddy wants to cut in at any time. We do have certain cities that do allow residents to have a second cart. They have to pay for that in addition, separately. And their rate would be adjusted to accommodate that second cart. I'm not sure how how that billing would work and how you would keep track of which residents would have one cart versus two carts. We do have means of numbering the carts, so we know which resident has which cart. One of the cities that I'm working in just recently, we put UPC barcodes on, and those barcodes are, it's all computerized. So if the cart all of a sudden should take down the street to somebody else's house some night, the driver will be able to say, oh, wait a minute, that cart's supposed to be up the street. We have other cities that they put their names on their carts so that they aren't removed. But again, those are things that we can work out through negotiations. We're here at your pleasure, and we want to continue serving your town, so we're very amenable to working those type of issues out.
Well, the timing of the presentation, timing of my questions are relative to our process that we'll be going into in terms of our annual budget. So if we have information that we can use in making an assessment at that time is one of the things I think that will benefit us. There has been a concern by a resident or two that some folks have taken advantage of the one fee, and maybe it's a business issue where there's overloading, and this might be a means to regulate that to a certain degree, or at least fix the problem if it's really outrageous, and those that are just slightly over, if you would, the average should affect them.
Right.
So it's really, okay, that's what my questions were. That's what I was interested in hearing.
Okay, anybody else? Ron, you have a question?
If it's vandalized or stolen, would y'all replace it at no cost to the customer?
We would supply one cart per resident at no cost. Normally, historically, we would ask to be compensated if the cart were stolen, and we would have to replace it. If it's damaged, if the wheel breaks, or if for some reason it splits at the sides or the lid breaks off, they're warranted, And we can replace the cart at no additional cost as long as we get that cart back, because then we can go after the manufacturer on the warranty.
What's the approximate cost of the car?
The carts run, depending on the size, anywhere between $50 and $90. The 95-gallon carts, depending on the manufacturer, I've seen the prices come in anywhere between $65 and $90. But currently, because we have the carts already, we have the inventory. And like I said, when we worked out the rates today, we worked the cost of the cart into the rate. So I would throw out a number of about $65 for the carts that would be provided to your community.
I personally think it's a good idea. First of all, I think it would kind of make it uniform in Loxahatchee. You ride by some places, you see 3 or 4 trash cans. They're small, they're large. I've got a 55-gallon can. I had 2 at one time, but basically 1 is sufficient every week. I don't seem to get over that 1. And it costs me about a little bit less than that at Home Depot. But it's not, it doesn't have wheels. I have to hand truck it out and stuff like that. And then I like the idea of it, the price possibly decreasing. But I like the semi because we can still put bulk out and have it picked up. And I think it's a great idea. I think it would be an improvement to all of us.
A lot of our residents make little racks, if you say, where we put the garbage cans in so the animals don't tip them over. Is the lid or covers strong enough, or it has some type of mechanism that they can keep it closed that will prevent animals from?
The lids on these particular carts snap.
Okay.
They snap closed. So, I mean, it's not going, I won't say it's 100% animal proof, but it's probably the best that you're going to see. The advantage to having a cart, again, as Councilman Gerald just mentioned, is the aesthetics, but also for the fact that when they put those trash cans or they put the carts down at the curb, the lid's on there, so you have less chance of debris blowing until the truck comes to empty it. Sometimes folks won't put their lids on their trash cans when they put them down in the street and you have a windy day and you get stuff blowing everywhere. So it does have that advantage that the lid will be on and will prevent, hopefully, 100%, but I'm not going to guarantee this. You have sneaky raccoons out there. I've seen them. They can undo a lot of different things. So, but again, if the resident is concerned about, an animal getting into it between pickups, they can always put a bungee cord or something like that over it. I've seen a number of different things done to them. But again, it will alleviate the blowing of any litter or any debris that might normally blow out on a windy day if the lid's not on the container.
Okay, anybody else comment anything? The only concern I've got at all is that a 95-gallon container is big. And as we get older, as I get older, right now I throw the 30 gallons in the back of the pickup truck and take it out there and drop it off the road. And I live on the front 5, so somebody in the back 5, has got to move a little farther, and that's my only concern.
They're not, I will be honest with you, they aren't light, so it's not like you can put them on the back of your pickup truck and drive them down to the curb. When you fill them up with garbage, I mean, the carts themselves probably weigh about 25 pounds.
Yes, and remember, it's a half a yard, so
Yeah.
you get a yard of trash a week service. So,
I think the size is great, because if you've got 2 days of pickup, I mean, we barely make 30 gallons. We don't make 30 gallons a week, so I think that part's a good thing. My only concern is somebody living in the back, that would have a little bit of problem getting that big a container out to the road.
they roll.
And then the opposite, and I know it rolls, but still down, 700 feet of driveway, because that's what a back property, or 800 feet of driveway, that's a pretty good haul.
And those are some things that to be considered as you're deliberating this issue. I've seen it work in a lot of communities, probably, but again, where they work are the more urban communities, where
Right.
there are paved streets and driveways.
And again, I like the idea of saving some money, I like the idea of a uniform can, you know, and I like the idea because right now, on garbage day, you will see a mixture of 2 or 3 different cans and bags and stuff ripped open, and you know, hopefully we can keep everything inside the container. But anyway, all right. I've got one public comment,
Thank you very much.
and thank you very much.
Maybe you could bring us out a can and
Sure.
we'll idea how big and
Push each other around.
I'll bring you tomorrow morning, tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't like to go to Keene. Dennis Litt, 13402 North Road. Just want to tag on to what Mayor Browning had said. The folks in the back 5, I mean, I just can't imagine. You know, I see John L. Sullivan on that road. When he brings this stuff out, he's got his golf cart with a John Deere bike on the back that he, you know, unloads bag by bag. You know, so I think it would be a hardship on a lot of folks. We also got to understand that this is truly a rural community. Even if you want to compare city acres, that doesn't compare because they're on you know, 1.5 acre lots, and they're close to the road. There isn't any back, you know, 5s or back 1.25 acres. I think so. This is something that I think is a good idea for them. I'm not sure how well it's going to work for us because we have a lot of what's the politically correct words to use now? Undocumented labor, multi-family living arrangements here in the groves. That's not going to cope very well with that because these folks don't speak English. The 2 or 3 of them are on F roads that I drive by on garbage pickup day. Things are just heaped out there. You know, getting that message across in 95-gallon containers is going to be problematic. So I think my son did a paper that I think the road needs the road. It's going to be, you know, we just ought to stay a little bit. Because we don't even use garbage cans. We've got 5 dogs. We get those big 55-pound bags of dog food. We take those up and tape them shut. And that's what garbage is. We don't have any cans to bring back to the house on garbage day.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. All right, thank you for the presentation. It gives us something to think about. And so anyway, all right. Moving to, there is nothing on committee reports, public hearings, ordinances, resolutions. We're moving to 8, administrative update. Mark.
Thank you, Your Honor. The first item is a review of the IGC meeting. The meeting was actually rescheduled from 3/28/12 to April 5th, 2012. At the meeting, we had Council Member Ron Gerald, who was replacing Councilman Bolson. I'll explain that in a second. And of course, Cleve, John Ryan, Cleve Sonny, John Ryan, and myself. One of the first things that we talked about was the IGC committee member terms of services. And, you know, Councilmember Gerald was originally scheduled until May. However, he graciously gave his remaining ones to Councilman Bolson. However, Councilman Bolson had some medical issues and was not able to attend that day. So Councilman Gerald did come back in and sit in for the town in that meeting. We had 4 items in their old business. One of them was the IGC committee member terms of service. We did discuss the traffic signal up at Shell B&D and just a number of issues about that relative to a mast arm versus wire signals and what the county may require and just a number of issues along those lines. We discussed the fact that the town had submitted the grant application for the recreational trails. And we had a lot of discussion about the future town and district joint workshops. Probably at our next meeting, we're going to work on that in earnest. What I indicated I would do is I do have a list of issues that the facilitator had developed in the ancillary issues in addition to the 2 main issues that were the subject of the 14th meeting. And so what I said is we will at least start there. We'll start to discuss that whole package of issues and look at a possible schedule for meetings, maybe at our second meeting of the month starting in June or along those lines. as the committee can look that out and then come back and report to you, and they can report back to the supervisors and see if we can all get together on a time frame. We did jump into new business, which we actually started as old business, so it was related to modifications to the interlocal agreement between the district and the town. And Supervisor Ryan provided some ideas and some concepts that he had. Administrator Sonia then offered some input, and also Councilmember Gerald some input. And then I was last. We did talk about the issue of primary requests for road when the road resurfacing work is complete. We discussed some more details relative to the documentation and invoice format, work scheduling on certain roads and trails, and budget estimates for the year. So the district has thrown out a number of ideas. From my standpoint, what I indicated after listening to everything was obviously I'm open to a lot of these suggestions, depending upon making good business sense for the town. We also veered off in that discussion. We got into a number of other discussions, Cutting Canal Road, which we talked about a little bit, which is on the agenda tonight for a report. But we talked about that a little bit. We talked about speed humps some in terms of some of the issues related to speed humps. And then we kind of concluded, Councilman Gerald asked for possibly, he may bring up tonight relative to South A, North B, as far as the aprons and some of the ojum, I guess I don't want to usurp him if he's going to bring that up. Are you going to bring that up, Councilman?
I think the problem's been taken care of.
Oh, okay, well, okay, so I'll end it there, with the exception that our next meeting would originally have been scheduled for the 25th, which is next Wednesday. However, the town is one of the several small cities sponsoring the League of Cities General Membership Meeting. So we all had agreed, based upon the calendar, we were going to move it. We'll be moving it to Tuesday at 11 o'clock on the 24th. So with that, unless there are any questions, I'll move on to my next item.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, the next thing I want to remind the council, make you aware of, I did send you all an email regarding an email that I received from Mark Whitman at Palm Beach County Schools, and they're having a meeting on Thursday night to talk about boundary changes as it relates to Western Pines Middle School and Osceola Creek Middle School. He had advised in this email that it may impact both the acreage and lots that actually grows. So I sent you that email, make you aware of that meeting if you're interested in attending. The next item is an issue that Mike and I discussed, and I may have discussed it with several of you. What we have found that there are some Scribner's errors that we are finding in some of our code sections, specifically as it relates to Article 87, tree preservation, and they're important. One was in the tree mitigation section, which it's supposed to be 10 feet based upon checking previous drafts, and it looks like 10 inches went in. So we would, Mike and I talked about it, and there was another section where there was a may and a shall in the same sentence, which obviously, you know, who's guess as to what the real intent is. So that one we're going to look at, but for the Scribner's errors, what we're asking is that basically you acknowledge that, and we'll correct those as we go through the process of future amendments and things. But we just wanted to make you aware of it now, and we're going to process it like we think it was meant to be, especially that one of the trees with the 10 feet to 10 inches. It should be 10 feet, and that's what we're going to.
Well, was it in relationship to the diameter of the tree?
No, not the EVA, too, but the actual size of the tree.
Oh, my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that one there is pretty clear, it's intended to be 10 feet. The one with the may and the shall, we'll probably look to you for some interpretation on that.
And the last item under my
question.
I'm sorry.
One of the things that we mentioned, there's two items. One that was mentioned was that in the past, that we had a committee that put a lot of time into a set of guidelines that when we did land use code, and I think it was kind of overlooked or fluffed off or whatever it might be, there wasn't really a hard look at what the committee had proposed and the council had approved and made sure that got into land use code. We need to take a look at that. But the other item that I made available to Mark, two documents that come from our process of going through land use code changes. One is, well, actually, they're almost famous now already, but one is the document that was sent out with changes that we had agreed to at a council meeting. And the other one is actually the document that came back, I think it was within almost 24 hours, or if not less, where it came back and was supposed to have all the changes in it, which is the process we were following. We would submit modifications and then we'd get them back and we'd have a new document, we'd have to go through them. We know that those, I've given a copy of those two documents because I had asked for the two documents to be printed at one time by the town office because it was clear that we had we had an item dropped from one to the other. We went through that relative to the noise part of the noise, and we all agreed at the time, yeah, it was something that was missed. And, recently, when we were given a rehash of our land use codes by the State College with a comparison, one of the things that is in our land use code, which should not be in our land use code, because we changed it, was the size of the flag. You all, I would imagine, remember the conversation we had about flag size and pole size. Well, the original is still in there, and we made changes to it. I bring this up because my concern is that these two documents now are famous, so to speak, and that we know there's two situations, and these are random happenstance. We didn't find them because we were looking. We found them just because we used the document and these two items came up. One was looked at by Larry, brought to our attention, Larry Lefkowitz, and the other one, I'll bring it to your attention. I'd like to ask Mark to hire somebody. Outside of, I don't believe this is his responsibility to go back and prove something that was possibly missed. And have somebody go through two documents. One is to read and one is to listen. So we can typical proofreading exercise, 200 pages approximately of our documents. To go through and say, what do we have in the first document, which had our changes, what came out as a result of those updates that we got back, which does not have specifically two changes. My concern is because these are only real random things that we found, that there's more, and there could be a lot more. And it's not going through 10, 12, 14, 16, whatever number of iterations. You don't have to go through them all. There's just one set of documents that we know have a problem. And so my suggestion is we just get somebody outside and Mark, give them instructions, say, I want you to go through this thing. And if it's in this document, not in the document, came back, it's supposed to have changes, you let me know. Highlight it, tell me about it. Bring it back to the council as far as a summary. If there's only two items, I'll be amazed. But if it was many items, then I would think that's what we're looking for, because we made those changes, and I don't think they made it in. The rest of the, as you run across situations, address them, I think that's a good strategy to follow. The only other that I mentioned earlier was that we have the documents that we put forward. I just would like, again, to reiterate, we need to ask that, see if that looks the same as what we did in land use code. It may be changed, and we may have made some changes, but I don't ever recall it was really done in such a fashion that we reviewed that document, we overlaid it, and made sure it was done. So I would like to ask Mark and make a motion that he appropriate somebody, or get somebody to come in, a team is my concept, to go through those two documents and read, proofread, and get back to us as to the things that are missed, because we know that there are some things missed.
Okay. We have a motion. Is there a second? We'll discuss it.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Ron. All right, and we're talking 200 pages?
200 pages. Yeah.
Okay.
It's proofread.
Right. Do we have any idea what this is going to run us? Do we file on the page? Or do we need to wait for Mark to come back with something?
Well, it's a lot of pages, obviously, it's very meticulous reading, you have to, do comparison purposes, and I'm not sure at this point who I would get, or, but I, obviously I follow through if that's the direction.
I guess it's under $500 to do that, would you say, for 2 people to spend 2 to 3 days reading?
Yeah, it might be a little more than that, I think, but.
Well, I think it's worth it if we know that we've got errors. And I don't know how many we might have.
It just depends on the hourly rate, like, you know, what I get. And you have to, you've got a little bit of ability, you know, just a little bit, you know.
All right, any other discussion on this?
Mr. Mayor, I believe we spent close to $10,000 having this work done, codifying the ULDCs, and I think that certainly if it's found that the errors relate to that, you know, we ought to look to the company that did this book to make it right, for one thing. In addition to what we're talking about here, I think we also need to look at some of the issues with the ULDCs relative to their effect in reality versus how they sound on paper. There are some issues, especially relating to the codes and some agricultural businesses that I think the codes are a little bit too strict and are adversely impacting businesses where they shouldn't. And I don't know by what process we look at those issues, but I think we need to. I think some of the things that are going on right now, the amounts of money that are being proposed to residents to pay for things that are really wrong, in my opinion, are something that we need to get a hold of and stop before it just becomes a runaway train. I don't know if you want to go into specifics on it, but we do need to look at these things and perhaps if we could direct Mark to look at, rather than enforcing the existing codes, present to us where these issues are so that we could decide that perhaps these things are not things that we want to go forward through the judicial process and to the magistrate. There are things regarding setbacks and regarding damage by animals that are grazing in a field that, you know, really, some of them are very chilling things, and I don't think anybody would graze their animals in a field anymore if they realize what the liability potentially is.
Okay. You know, and they're probably, anybody else would comment first? I'm sorry.
I think Tom brought up a good point. Let's first approach the original company that put together ULDC, see if they can help resolve some of these inconsistencies, and then after that we can move from there. But I think that would be the proper first step. And then as far as the other issues that Tom has brought up, I think we as a town we're gonna have to bring them up and amend the ULDCs as necessary.
Okay. Commissioner?
Just we need to get it done. If we go back to the people that drew up the original documents, I would think they would be responsible. And if they're going to charge us an additional cost, then I definitely want it brought back to the council before we pay them any more money. Somebody drew up those documents.
If I may, I think, and Vice Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it's not, I don't know if it may be hard to determine where the problem lies. I don't necessarily think it's the codification company, but I can't say for sure. You do have the company that was doing the ULDC, but then it appears from the drafts that you gave me, Vice Mayor, it does look like it could have been drafts that were still in-house to some extent in conjunction with the company. So I'm not so sure we're going to be able to totally determine who really is at fault, other than maybe say, here's the problem. You know, would that be fair?
Yeah, that's matter of fact, the document that came back to us, the cover letter had addressed the fact that what they received in the document was not in the form that they had provided, and the form did not allow them to pick up the changes in the same fashion that they have prescribed. Yeah, so I would have suggested that if I felt like we were not contributing to the problem. And the distinction between, if we've got issues in the land use code, and to address some of Tom's points, this is we know there's a problem. on a particular set of documents, day 1 to day 2. And other things that we may have left in the land use code that we received and did not address them, and we want to now have them pointed out, and maybe we need to address them. But this is the only case that I know the council approved changes, and we did not get them. And I just don't know how many. That's the problem. So I'm looking at the problem. I'm looking at this as a step, one step in many. But we know, and this is pretty clear, is here's one document, here's the other document. They're supposed to be the same, and they're not. And by going through this step, at least let's put that aside. Let's get those things that maybe we've asked to have done, and we're now going to pick up on and correct. That might even answer 1 or 2 issues that we're seeing now, that we're looking at this thing and saying, why did we approve that? Or did we really agree to that? So maybe that first step will help us in, who knows, maybe another couple of items, maybe nothing, but I know that it's wrong, and I would want to continue another week. Actually, I don't want to continue as far as we've gone, knowing that there's something wrong.
My feeling is, in some ways, it's like a living document. The first time through, it seemed to me we beat it to death. And there were different copies floating around here, and honestly, from week to week, meeting to meeting, it seemed like, yeah, that sounded like what we did, so I think I have no problem at all as long as it's a reasonable number of taking care of the first one. I mean, I just hate to spend, $500 or $1,000 just answering the question about a flagpole and maybe one other thing. At the same time, I think it's probably a good thing to do that if we take the ULDCs and begin to relook at them, and if we all look at the same section at the same time, and then set aside a little time in each meeting to say, do we have problems with this? Because I agree with Tom. I think some of the stuff is very severe. At the same time, I know the reasoning behind it, and so, something we probably need to readdress, re-talk about, and modify. It's a living document. It's much like a development plan. We realized in a fairly recent meeting that our idea of a term was not the same as the developers. Therefore, there are several things we need to redress and work some way of giving us what our intentions were from the start. So, I think probably both things are good. I agree with both. Maybe what we can do when we readdress the ULDCs is maybe take recommendations from the council members as to which sections we need to deal with first. And, give us, okay, next month we're going to talk about this one. We take the copy, we go through it, we highlight what we want. If we're all right with all of it, we say we're all right with all of it. And then we discuss it, and we bring it up. So anyway, probably a good way to do it. All right, we have a motion, a second, and we have Mark set some people on the 200 pages specifically to make sure that is provided. Okay. No comments by the public on that? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if we could, on the 2 particular issues that I brought up, could we ask Mark to look at those and bring them to the council rather than take them any further in the code enforcement process until we've had a chance to discuss it?
I think we can. I mean, we can single out something if it's a problem.
I think that I believe Mark's aware of the 2 cases that I'm referring to. One's relating to some incidental damage by some horses to some trees, and another is a setback of a shade house. And if he could just address how those issues are violations and how we as a council could look at that and say that seems appropriate to us or we'd like to change it. That's how I think would be the best to handle it. I'm not really trying to advocate for any particular position.
Right.
I do think in the one case it really is very extreme.
Right, and I guess, and I'm familiar with both cases, and the one is kind of like a big deal, it's still a big deal. The other one, to me, is a bigger deal, only because of actions in the past that were done to destroy things that were protected, and it was done in, oh gee, I didn't know my hogs got into that wetland and totally destroyed all of it.
Right.
You know, and in that situation where somebody ropes the horses into it, not out of it, I've got some problems with it. But at the same time, I think we can work with them. But anyway, we know the situation. So if you want to bring those up, how do you want to do it, Tom? You want to bring those up separately and we talk about them in the future? Or what?
Yeah, I think that would be the best, and just sort of hold in advance anything, as long as that's agreeable with Mark.
If I could, Mayor, if we could have a motion on that, I think what you're really asking, and let me clarify and tell me if I'm on the right track. What you're asking me to do is basically stay or hold, take no action on these two matters until I can look at them, investigate them, and come back to you with a report.
And I think that's a good one. Neither of these actions, not where anything's going to change.
This is in order to confirm that the code as written and being applied is the intent of the council. Okay, it's not to deflect any code enforcement or to take it away from, you know, this is the basically allow you to review something now that you're seeing how it works. Okay, because we knew that when we were doing the ULDC.
Right.
We had that whole year of workshops. One of the things we always kept saying is, like you said, they don't read the document. We're not going to really know what it does.
So we
use it. And then once now we're using it, it's different from typos and scrivener's errors. That's something, well, now we're using it. We see how it works. Is that the intent?
Right.
If that's the intent, great, you get direction. While you confirm that intent, if that's what your direction is on these two specific issues, where you can confirm your intent, they're going to have you confirm that before they force someone to go through an enforcement process. That's the way I'm looking at the discussion.
Yeah.
I would agree. I agree. This is not relative to personalities. I'm concerned how this applies to everybody more than how it applies to one person.
Right.
And I don't want you all to become used to being a forum for an appeal of code enforcement matters.
And that's, I guess that's my fear here. You know,
Well, I think that there are things that
there's an
really
issue.
apply, there are issues that apply townwide. You know, relative to the setback issue, it's, as I've said before, when you only have 300 feet wide, 50 on each side takes you down to only having 2/3 of your property. When you have less, you really don't have anything. And I know a lot of shade houses right near the edge, so let's not.
Yeah, and I think a shade house is totally opposite than a shop. And therefore, I think the intent was more, pasture was pasture, but if you're going to have like a corral or something more intense, you know, if you got 300 by 660, you ought to keep it kind of away from a neighbor's fence to where it's less of a problem. And then we do that with the birds, we do that with a lot of stuff, to keep people from putting things like that right on the property line. What's the intent? You know, I think we need to look at it sometimes case by case. If it's not affecting the neighbor next to it, I think it should be an easy process to say, you know what, my neighbors don't have any problems with it, so let's make a special exception, you know, and not have it cost them an arm and a leg. But that's something that we probably shouldn't need to make that decision. It should be, you know, the last thing I want to do is use this to beat people over the head, you know. But at the same time, the purpose of it is to protect natural resources, natural things, tree canopy and things like that. And we don't want somebody to be able to go out there, oh gee, I accidentally destroyed all of the cypress on my property, and I really don't want to pay any mitigation for it. Gee, I'm bad, but you know, fine me $50. I mean, I think we just have to be careful with that. In this situation, I think it truly was an error where they didn't realize, you know, what they were doing. But at the same time, we've got to protect, you know. Let's look at the ULDC. If we need to change it, I think we need to change it.
I have a question for Mike on his comment, so that I better understand. I sense that we need to be careful. One, in taking cases that might come forward that are violation cases, and that they appeal to the council to intervene. Somehow a balance between that and reviewing the ULDCs, and you know, we don't have to start from page 1. We can start anywhere.
I would suggest you start, for example, with these, because there are topics of potential enforcement, or they're being applied as we speak. There's a concern among, I'm sure this, at least perhaps one of you, and even town administration, we've had conversations on at least one of these two cases, the trees, that, you know, as applied, you know, is that the intent of the council as is being applied? You know, and you know, I think you're going to see a lot more of this now than you hopefully will as we go through time.
Okay, I'm looking for you to make sure I'm clear on this. The idea of doing this, and I hesitate to say the practice, but the idea of taking a look at ULDCs, wherever we want to look, is not a problem, as far as I'm concerned. You know, any meeting, any time, any council member, town management, town council can always bring that up and say, you know, I think you need to look at this. Or, my concern is that, one, we make it a practice that every time an issue becomes a code enforcement or a violation of sorts, it comes back, we put it on hold, and we review the ULDCs. I mean, that may be what we run into, a lot of that. So as before we step into this domain, just kind of with eyes open, we need to know, and I'm not pro or con, I'm just raising a question. We need to know that it doesn't put us into a box somewhere. It doesn't misstep somehow. We can't go back and say, you know what I mean? It doesn't jeopardize what we're intending in 200 pages. If we've got 20 paragraphs that are bad, I wouldn't want to throw out.
No, but I think it's important as a town manager asks that you do, if you're going to do something like that, that you do it by way of motion. So there's no doubt from his perspective that basically what we're doing is almost like a reverse zoning in progress. Okay, you know, you do the opposite where you put it in place tonight, anybody comes in tomorrow, apply to it. You're saying tonight, like, let us look at this again before you go and apply it any further. You're always going to be contacted by residents and people dissatisfied with it, and you have to rely in large measure on your own perspective of the nature of that complaint and the issue that's being raised. And in this particular case, there's an issue of the onerous nature of the way perhaps it's being written and interpreted. You know, if someone brings it up and the council doesn't think it's an issue, you don't take a motion and there's no direction and it goes through. It's hard for me to tell you that, you know, that not to do that, not to, when someone raises it, you know, that's what you're here for, to raise concerns. But I think that what I'm trying to get at is make sure the council understands that it is an opportunity for folks to try to derail the system. We've got to be aware of that, you know. But you know, if an issue appeals to one of the five of you all, I think it's your prerogative to bring it up and have it discussed, and the town manager will take your direction on what to do. And a lot of these will come up not in the context of code enforcement, but when somebody applies to do something on the property or interpretation that we need abuses and things like we brought to you 2 meetings ago about, you know, we have this issue about this use at this location, this is what we're thinking about. That's also part of this process.
Right. Okay, Mark?
Yeah, just a comment there. And just, I don't think if you take the action tonight, it's going to necessarily cause a precedent or anything. I'm not suggesting that. But I will tell you that in our sister cities that have, you know, code enforcement divisions and departments, generally, you know, what happens in these kinds of things is, you know, you might have an issue with what a code enforcement officer has done, so that it gets kicked up to the department head. Maybe the person will try to go around the department head to the manager, and then sometimes if they're not getting that release, they try to seek a political solution onto council members. The special magistrate is a good process, because what it does is it does take some politics out of the situation when you have code enforcement boards and things like that. I think we're growing up. I'm seeing it, I think you're seeing it, as we've had a code enforcement process in place, which even though it's complaint only, you see that we have special magistrate system started, And what I have seen now is as people have violations and they haven't attempted to either correct them, or they have, or they may have a difference of opinion with our vendor, I will try to let our vendor handle it first before I get involved. Obviously, it depends on a case-by-case basis. If there's a situation where they're alleging that the code isn't being interpreted right or something, I will try to insert myself into the process, but I don't normally try to jump in there right away, especially if the process is already as a special magistrate, because that magistrate has jurisdiction. I don't. And so you got to let the process play out. I'm just kind of giving you a caution that we're starting to see this, and I think I'm seeing more activity. People are trying to come to me, getting me to mitigate the problem, and I think you're going to see it more. So that's just my caution to you. If you give me the direction, that's going to happen. It's going to happen more and more. It's just the way the world is happening.
And I think that's what we talked about was going to happen. That as people have issues, that they're going to bring them up, and I don't think we want to have it go to a special magistrate. And if it's not our intention that the code remain that way. And in particular, the one relative to trees, if you read it, to me, it's hard to see what the violation is. Because it's really, it's relative to clearing, and this isn't clearing. And there's nothing there that specifically says, you shall not do this. There is a definition that says this is a problem, but there's no, to me, just the code itself needs to be a little bit more specific in saying, don't allow this to occur.
And if that's lacking, if that's lacking, I feel a little awkward. We've got a public here, and it sounds like we're talking in code, and I really don't want to hide anything from people. And we've got a situation where a guy had leased a pasture, and to give his horses some shade, he roped off an area within a cypress head and put the trees inside the cypress head for shade, which ended up ringing all the cypress trees, and they will die. Now, we have codes that protect cypress trees, so therein lies the problem. The person that did it didn't realize where he was messing up. So if our code is not clear enough on protecting of these areas and not just clear cutting, then we need to readdress these and look at it. And maybe that's a case that in this situation it's not clear enough for that landowner or that renter, and it's something that we can deal with. So anyway, I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. So what are we ended up with? Are we just going to put this on hold? Are we going to let the special magistrate kind of deal with it, or what are we going to do?
That's why we're looking for direction.
Yeah, or are we looking at the ULDC to see if it was clear enough to say you shouldn't have done what you did?
Well, in the case of, if you're asking me, Mayor, in the case of the person with the case of litigation that Councilman Golson is talking about, I actually gave them, as of last week, a 1 month, I hate to use the word stay, but I gave them 1 month to try to come up with some solutions, and we gave them options. If you link it to the other project, that may be a more lengthier amount of time, so I don't know if you necessarily want to do that. I think you probably want to do this on some certain matter. That would be my recommendation to you if you're going to do that.
Yeah.
My thought is that you have identified a code section you want to review, just we'll put it on the next agenda. And then you review it.
And then I think that's actually a good way to
start the
review.
process. That's what my thinking was. But that's why we need a motion, so that he knows what to do with that.
Well,
I think we're kind of developing our process here, because, yes, this is something really breathing document. We expect that we have to go through, we expect there's going to be things that we look at with a new set of eyes, a fresh set of eyes, maybe a little younger set of eyes over there. But we need to think ahead about the process. If we have, I would suggest that if we have a situation that we would need, let's say, a town manager to communicate back to the council that this item was raised by, let's say, a council member and raised, or I am raising it as a concern, and it seems like it's not really necessarily represents what we're trying to do, would you all make that kind of like a little bit of a homework assignment, and then the next week, you know, not the Friday before our meeting, but as soon as it comes up, and then give us a heads up and say, these are the documents, this is the area, take a look at it. I mean, I'm happy to do that. I didn't look at any items that we're talking about. I think you're talking about tonight, certainly the one about the Cypress. But if I had an opportunity, I would have liked to have looked at that, and then in making a motion or making some direction, I would feel a little better prepared to say, yeah, let's make a motion and tell Mark to put this on hold, these two items, I presume it's 2 cases, and put them on hold until our next meeting where we can address those 2 items and have a discussion. That would be a motion that I would make.
Okay. All right, so are you making that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Jim's making a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that. In other words, we're going to be talking about these 2 items.
And one is already on hold as we speak.
Right, and the ULDC that applies to these 2. That's what we're going to do. Okay.
You're still talking in code, what page, what section?
But that, we need to come up with that, and Mark will get that for us.
Pre-mitigation is 87, section 87, and it's the RR, it's the RR section in the,
Included in our motion, have you do that just to give
Yeah,
it
put it on the
back.
website or get it out there where we,
So we know what to look at.
Okay. Ron?
Just one comment. We talk about a magistrate. These 2 problems here, especially the one with the shade house, that's been going on for quite a while. And I explained to the person, I believe that he should have came in front of the council for a special exception. And I would hope that if there's a possibility that we might give him a special, or anybody a special exception, that they would have the opportunity to come in front of the council before they have to go into the magistrate, unless it's a cut and dry, where we've got some problems that are serious out there that has to go in front of the magistrate.
Let me just clarify that, so there's no misconceptions. On the Shade House one, the Shade House case, that is not going to the special magistrate yet. The issue there was the respondent wrote a letter and wanted you to change the code, but wasn't willing to do cost recovery. So that spun it off into a whole different direction, and that's the only reason I'm looking at it and how best to address it with you. But we'll definitely bring it up at the next meeting, since, but neither one of them is on the track to go right to the special magistrate right now, so there is time to deal with it.
I think the objection there was the cost. You mentioned $4,000 or something like that. It sounded high.
Who's seconding that motion?
Yes.
Ron said,
Yeah, Ron, second. Okay, Nina Corning's got a comment?
I'm fine, you guys, so I'll be far enough there, so.
All right. All right, so you will get the numbers of the sections in the ULDC and get it out.
Motion.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Mayor, I have 2 more items, and I'll try to be quick before we move into new business. The first one, old business, I'm sorry. The first one is an issue having to, again, relates to the planning and zoning aspects, and I may have spoken to a couple of you about this. I'm going to be referring to that map later when I talk about planning and Okeechobee, but that's considered our official zoning map, except it's not as official as it should be, because we have a number of zoning designations that are currently maintaining a county zoning designation, particularly a lot of the commercial on Southern, where instead of having a Loxahatchee Groves commercial designation, it has a county commercial designation. Generally, the way you normally handle that is at the time you do your comprehensive plan, you rezone all properties that are inconsistent with your zoning. However, the council at the time chose, I think the ordinance number is 2010-009, to basically deal with these matters on a case-by-case basis as an applicant came in to redevelop. Okay, so we have a situation now where we have a property that's on Southern, and the property owner is in negotiations right now with the leasee to go forward. It has been, my position that as long as it keeps a county zone designation, I don't have the authority to apply county codes, nor should I. We really should be doing our codes. What I'm suggesting to you is that, and I'm not asking for your action tonight, I'm just kind of raising the issue with you, is I will be bringing it back to you. I think we need to look for a more painless approach in this matter where the property owner can come in with not a full extensive rezoning application, but just give the town the authority to administratively rezone his property and not have the property owner incur cost recovery costs for the purposes of doing what we want them to do in the first place, which is to put a town zoning designation on the property. So I recognize because of the cost recovery implications and everything, I want to look at this more, and I want to see if I can come up with some kind of solution that I can propose to you. I just wanted to bring it to your attention tonight because it is a problem. I can't really, to me, it makes no sense to go out and spend the money to have an official map done. It's going to be it's not going to be up to date, and it's not going to be very efficient because we still have a number of zoning issues that don't represent what they should be.
Well, I can speak to the rationale for doing what you did was obviously there was no intent to downzone any properties. And if we had changed, rezoned all these properties individually, we could have had a lot of issues case by case. And so a lot of the new, what had been done before as the cities get incorporated and they have their first comp plan is they kind of keep the zoning in place. But ultimately, any uses have to match the comp plan. So when the trigger point comes for development or redevelopment, is at that time appropriate to work with the developer to make sure that we put the right zoning designation in place that's consistent with the comp plan.
Sure.
So, otherwise you've got to go through and rezone all these properties at the same time you're doing the comp plan, and that's an undertaking. So the step was put in place to allow this type of thing on a case by case. And so we'll have to talk more about whether the administrative rezoning is an option. But as these properties come in, we look at it and say, your use is consistent with the comp plan, but you've got a county zoning designation. The closest town designation is X. To allow you to do what you're going to do with the comp plan. And that's how we were. That's the intent of doing that. And you always have that when you incorporate and you have a new plan.
Sure.
Yeah, existing zoning and existing uses.
So you don't need a motion on that, you just are ready.
Just wanted to update you that that's going to be coming back for further discussion.
Okay.
And the last item is, as you can see, we are, my plate is not only full, my salad plate's full, and my soup bowl is getting full as well at every meeting. And, I've had a number of council come to me on their pet projects, and I shouldn't say pet projects, but the projects that they're interested in, wanting me to address it. And I am working on a lot of them. It doesn't seem like I'm getting a lot done. So what I'd like to do, the management company would like to have a discussion with you at the next meeting to have you prioritize the projects and also to talk about the planning and zoning function, which was never addressed. And that seems to be an area, as you can tell just by our discussions tonight, how deeply the management company is getting sucked into those issues and taking away from time on doing some of the projects. So really what we'll do is we'll have an agenda item and we'll list all the projects for you and what we're doing, and hopefully we can come to some kind of consensus as to what you think are those key projects prioritized that you really want me to hop on and spend my time. Not that I won't look at other projects, but we'll try to knock some of those out based on priority.
Okay, that's fine.
Can you send, yeah, Mark, can you send that to us as soon as you put that list together? I don't want to wait until a month to see it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to old business. Recommendation regarding Okeechobee Boulevard.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's me. Let me just say just some history and background on this. As you know, on January 3rd, I brought you an agenda report supporting no action on taking any kind of study or plan relative to Okeechobee. And you had supported that recommendation, but you did ask me to look into the situation and give you some more feedback. And I did tell you that I would take it to all our boards to get input, so they could give me the input to formulate some recommendations for you. So I did that. That process has been completed. After looking at a number of things, I will tell you that I am still convinced that there's no plan or study effort that is needed and that's due to a lack of consensus. I hear a lot of different opinions out there. Nobody really, there's no prevailing opinion as to what, other than the fact that there is, concern about commercial on Okeechobee. So therefore, I have a series of recommendations that I want to propose to you and suggest, and also I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, and not that I want you to adopt that example or if it's just more or less for illustrative purposes. But I would recommend, first of all, that rather than another planning exercise and effort that's going to take a lot of time, we simply need to do amendments to the plan. We need to amend the goals, objectives, and policies as it relates to both Okeechobee Boulevard and to Southern Boulevard. And the reason I say Southern Boulevard is because in a minute I'm going to tell you that words mean things in your comprehensive plan. And right now, like one word that's tossed around quite a bit is limited economic development on Okeechobee Boulevard. But yet the word you use in your policy before that is encourage, which is a very weak, what we consider a weasel word in planning language. Which kind of means that, you're encouraging that happens, but the door could be open necessarily to commercial. We're also giving the impression, because we use the word concentration on Southern, that commercial uses will be concentrated on Southern. And what's happening is that I'm talking to people, I'm starting to see people with the impression like Southern is going to be very intensive. And I don't know if that's the direction that you all were thinking about. So, we're potentially creating expectations of development. And my understanding, having talked to a lot of you and having talked to people in the past, is that one of the main reasons for incorporation, or one of the reasons for incorporation, was that you all wanted to control what happens in your town, not have the county control it for you. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the map here and do a very crude illustration of just, and it's all about control, is what I'm really talking about in terms of trying to get a handle on these situations. And Mike going to pick me up so I'm talking about it.
Oh, yes. I checked that.
Is this okay? You want me to see it? Okay, this is our unofficial official.
Yeah, put it right over on the side wall, and I think that way everybody can see
Everybody
it.
can see it.
Yeah.
Are you still going to pick me up?
And then turn it just straight parallel with the wall and mark it.
All right, better? Can you pick me up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the Okeechobee quarter, right here. And you can see there are 6 full intersections and 2 half intersections at Folsom, and over here at 160, 167. Okay, one of the things that you could technically do if you wanted to try to control the development on Okeechobee is you could come up with a concept where you call it neighborhood activity centers, neighborhood spheres of activity. Well, what you would do is you would pick 2 or 3, depending upon what you wanted to do, intersections that you think you would want to plan or control. And you might even make them floating. You might not even have to designate certain locations. When you do that, what you would be telling an applicant, and we would put this in the comprehensive plan, so that it would be a legislative change which gives you the control as opposed to quasi-judicial, which kind of ties your hands to some extent, because now all they have to prove is that they're meeting the requirements of that particular application. So you want to have some flexibility in terms of looking at this. What you would do is, and when you talk about, when I'm talking about an intersection, I'm talking an activity type center, neighborhood center. So what you would do is, you would want a potential developer or an applicant or whoever it is to attempt to do some land assembly. The land assembly could be more on a concentric basis. It could be more depth on one side. It could be a whole different kind of forms. What they would do is you would have them come in. We would require that in conjunction with this plan amendment that they would provide a sector plan, which basically tells you how much you're going to allocate, how many acres, and for what uses. You would have them provide a market study, which would show you that there's a market for what they're showing you and the need for it within the town. And then we would add all the other plethora of information that you would require in an amendment, so that they would go forward, they would propose it, and you would approve it via a comprehensive plan amendment. Again, it's just a crude example of what you can do, but those are the kind of planning steps that I think you need to take. What it does do is it gives you control. and it doesn't put us in a situation now which I think is not healthy we will potentially go. Those are my recommendations. We have to answer any questions.
Okay, questions? Council.
I think we should bring up these suggestions to P&Z and also possibly Jim Fleischman to discuss a little bit more. I know there's a lot more knowledgeable people as far as planning and zoning that's in our P&Z board and participates in it. And also Jim Fleischman can also give us a little more information about it too. And maybe they could do a better, more in-depth presentation to us to help school us on what exactly we're trying to do here. I mean, right now it sounds really good, but I'd like to flesh it out a little bit more before I give the go-ahead for it.
Again, it's only an example, it's not meant to be.
No, go ahead.
She won.
Ron?
Well, we've got two people on the P&Z board right here tonight. Personally, I'd like to hear their opinion. And, you know, as far as Jim Flashman, if I'm understanding Mark right, it does give us control. And that's what Grace Joyce has been telling us all along. We have to make some changes on our comp plan. So I'd like to hear from Dennis and I'd like to hear from Grace. I believe that's the only, do we have anybody? Okay, and Lawrence, I'd like to hear from our people right tonight instead of.
And in answer to Jim Fleischman, Jim and I did discuss this, and Jim has had some similar thoughts. He was thinking that something like that could work if you wanted to go that way.
Right. I guess we could do a show of hands as far as the three of you, or if you'd like to speak, I'd like you to speak.
We can ask a question in point of order, and maybe out of order, and if it is, Councilman Colsnay will advise me, but you have an item that he's put on the agenda, item 10C, which was a discussion moratorium which relates to the comp plan. Is that be appropriate to move that now, or?
We'll discuss this at the same time. I think that would be a good idea. Put them both together here.
If you could, then, because it seems that the subject matter appears just from the report and the item seems pretty the same, or consistent.
Okay. Who wants to address it? Tom, you want to address it? Go ahead.
Okay. What I was proposing is essentially designed to give staff an opportunity to, and the council, a chance to take a step back and address the various issues in the comp plan that have come up as the various developments have come forward here with Southern Boulevard and Okeechobee. And not in any way attempting to derail anything that's in the works right now. I was not looking to do that in the moratorium. And I'm certainly looking to the council to assist in specifically what we're trying to rein in here. But at the very least, I was looking to prevent any more land use changes until we had looked at the comp plan, primarily because of comments that we've received where, and Mark alluded to it, where we're asked to decide something, and then at the same time we're being asked to decide something, we're told by the developer staff and sometimes by our own staff that this is consistent. So, you know, you're sort of left with the idea, well, if it's consistent, you're asking me to decide, really, what are you trying to say? Am I supposed to pick consistent, or am I supposed to say, no, I want to be inconsistent? So I don't think that those descriptions are not really helpful to us when we're being left to make a decision. And I think that what we want to do is get that our comp plan is consistent with what we as a council and what we as a town feel is appropriate. And that's what I'm looking to do, is get a breathing period here where staff can catch up, the P&Z folks can catch up, they can get a little bit more cohesion as to where they're trying to get, because certainly the other evening at the college, folks were all over the place as far as where they thought we needed to be. And it was a very animated and lengthy discussion, and I really think that there's issues within the town, and certainly even within the developments that are coming along, whereas as time goes on in education to what things really mean comes in, people take a second look. And I think we all need to take that second look here. So technically, I don't know exactly. Mike certainly has the ability to help us craft what we want to do, but I think that that would be what I would recommend and what I would feel is appropriate.
Okay. Let's continue to discuss this, and then we'll entertain a motion and see what we're looking at. Any other input of what Mark was saying on this Okeechobee, or what we need to do? One of the things that I, and my thought has always been, since the public always talked about low impact non-residential in Okeechobee, that wording came from the neighborhood plan, it came from with a lot of charrettes. And I've been very careful not to tell people in Okeechobee, we're not going to outlaw commercial, but we really need it to be neighborhood serving and things like that. And one of the things that I thought would help was going back to the FAR. That if we limit them to something that more reflects our community, which is a 0.05 for the commercial, where right now on Southern it's 0.1, and and that's probably the right place for 10%. Now along Okeechobee, yeah, if you want to do something commercial that's neighborhood serving, it needs to be a 0.05, which more reflects. Now you've got more trees, more buffer, more natural area to separate it. We did a survey along that corridor, and I think every property, there wasn't a property outside of the Red Barn that was more than a 0.05. I think with the exception of a couple small lots where homes were on 3/4 of an acre. And I think the other one was the elementary school out there, and I think it was 0.053. But again, that's on the edge. But if we did that, and even a limitation on the churches, it was brought up that churches are allowed a 0.2, and I think that's too intensive on Okeechobee. So maybe what we need to do is look at that and say churches should be a 0.1 at maximum. And so kind of, but at the same time put together something with the help of our planning and zoning, with the help of our staff, to help us limit that. Mark?
Yeah, two things I wanted to mention, Mayor, which I'm sorry I forgot to mention these. And the first one is, obviously, in doing any amendments, there's still going to have to be a consensus on the council. We're going to develop that through a series of meetings, because, obviously, I'm getting you with this tonight, and you certainly want to develop whoever it's going to be, staff, consultant, to do this. So we do need to do that. The other thing I noticed in table 1, it's 1A future land use. It appears to me the floor area ratios are all messed up across the board. Because we have a 0.10 on commercial low, but on commercial office low, which technically is even a less intensive type land use, we have a 0.2. And yet the 05 is considered conservation use. So I understand where you're going about reducing it, but conservation use, I mean, I think all these ratios have to actually be reviewed and looked at.
Well, and all of them are set up for urban. All of them are set up for urban. Very few are set up for ag. As a matter of fact, I find it very interesting that the county nailed us and put us under a 1 house per 10 acres for years and years on a house, but then at the same time said it was all right to build commercial at a 0.1 or a 0.2. So, I don't understand their thinking of that. So, I mean, I like the looks of the fire station where it's treed and you don't hardly see it. So I guess that's kind of my thinking of something as a guideline, to where then if a person wants to come in, we're not saying you cannot have commercial, but it needs to more reflect our community through Okeechobee. The concept of the cluster, it only scares me from a standpoint that again, if we're talking, well, you allow them a 0.1 or a 0.2 in that cluster, you're going to have the next property come and say, well, I'm also on a corner. I mean, the first one, obviously, and I really wouldn't be that crazy about it, but would probably be D Road, because there are 3 nurseries sitting there that all 3 of them would probably love for that to go commercial. And at least one of them is very deep on D Road, as well as Okeechobee. So what's to keep the next road from saying, they had it and we don't? And honestly, you can't say Folsom's half an intersection, because it's a whole intersection. It's just we only have the land on one side.
I would address that by saying, you're going to have the pressure no matter what you do.
Sure.
That's why I indicated you have to control it. And that's why I said, you may want to designate it based upon your own research, or you may want to have them floating. But the idea is, what you don't want to do is you don't want to have strict commercial along the book. That's the one thing you don't want. So you have to, what you have to do is when you put it in a comprehensive plan, you have to continue to back your plan and stay with it and enforce it once you do that. You know, for those folks that are meeting what you want to see happen and, you know, the kind of development you want, the right intensities, the right mix, fine, you know, then go ahead and approve it. But then you don't, that doesn't give anybody the license to start to continue to strip off the rest of the development.
And I guess my thought is if it's a .05, there's going to be less of a rush to change a house to commercial. You know, is my only thought. So maybe we save some of the houses. Tom?
Yeah, and with the .05, just as an example, to have the same amount of commercial space, we would be preserving to an extent more open space because they need more land to do that.
That's right.
And once again, we have to look there at some of that land being preserved rather than just being parking lots or open fields, because you don't need a mall look.
There would be more trees. It would look more like the typical property in Los Angeles, and therefore it would more reflect our community, therefore limiting what's there from the more intensive uses.
But that proposal, as well as others, I think that's why we need to go with a moratorium to get that break so that we can get the chance to talk about it, because as we're talking about it, there's people planning to do something. And you know, they're planning all the time, and it's more intense, and some of the things are pretty scary, what people think would be nice, especially in my neighborhood. So, you know, I would like to see us move forward if we could on taking a break, and as we take a look at it, I think it's something that we can do in-house with staff, and we'll have to discuss that with them to what extent that fits into what they're doing or not. But I'm concerned that right now staff's overloaded as they've let on, and you know, if we're not reviewing these things, if we're not taking the time, if we're not able to review it properly, and when we do review it properly, we say, well, the paperwork's against us. You know, I know you want to do that, but we can't do it because we said you can do something else. I think we need to come to it. We need to stop that. We need to get to the point where, yeah, this is what we want, and we're going to proceed forward. People can count on that's what the town wants.
Okay. Any other discussion? Right.
I think we got a pretty good consensus here. I just want to make the request to have the P&Z board discuss what you mentioned, Mark, and also I'll make a motion for a 6-month moratorium and wait for something.
And not counting existing projects that are
Right.
already in the pipeline. Mike?
I was going to ask, is the moratorium on applications for land use amendments?
New applications, I guess.
For applications for land use amendments to the town's comprehensive plan.
Because if it already fits, there's no problem.
Right. With the exception for any application that was received on or before today's date. And when you do a moratorium, it's not in place tonight. The reason you have that motion is what's called the zoning in progress, because there's a process to put a moratorium in place. This moratorium needs to go to your planning and zoning board. And they will look at it and determine, okay, is the scope what we feel we need to handle this policy issue. And if there are any exceptions that need to be there, and they make a recommendation to you all, because this is a land development regulation. Then it comes to you and it has the 2 public hearing adoptions. And so what you would do with your motion tonight is give us clear direction of what to present to planning and zoning, and let them make a recommendation. In the meantime, it's a zoning in progress until that moratorium is put in place. And at the end, if it isn't or different, then that's what's going to control. But that's why the motion needs to be. The motion is to have a 6-month moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications for land use amendments.
Yes.
Okay.
Your second, and then we'll discuss.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Tom. Discussion, further discussion.
Yeah. I was holding my comments. That's me. I can bring it Problems we've been struggling with seem to be focused on Okeechobee. I don't know that we've had any issues per se that we struggle with in Southern. So I don't know if we need a moratorium on Okeechobee and Southern, or if we just want to have a moratorium on Okeechobee, because that seems what we've been stumbling along with. It says that, but boy, it doesn't really sound like that's what we want. And just throw out there for the heck of it, I'd start with .02, not .05. And kind of my point is, starting point is a house .01, and then I'll make it a little bigger, and that's called, maybe that fits the definition, .02. So, you guys, I'm usually lower on numbers than anybody. But I don't see the need for doing something all of a sudden, unless, Mark, in some of your examples, that we have issues with some of what we are using that we're applying to Southern, that we're going to get into the same type of issues that we seem to be struggling with Okeechobee, or is it? I just feel like Okeechobee is the issue, and let's put a moratorium.
I think what people are hearing is that because of the comments that council has articulated as far as the limited commercial on Okeechobee, and the fact that some people said it's going, we'll have our commercial on Southern, that's giving people the impression that Southern is going to be a more intensive corridor than I think the town envisioned it being.
But we have to address each application. We have the options to make it as intense as we want, or that we will approve. I'm not afraid of intensity because we get to review every item, and I think we have, conceptually, we're not going to let something be real intense, because it does come, it's not the image in keeping with what we are.
And you are saying that in light of 2 other applications that are currently pending.
Well, the application come forward, we've had to deal with them. We've had it, and there's not a one that started out and ended up where it started as far as intensity. It's all come down. And we chiseled them away, so to speak, and more in keeping with, I think, what was acceptable.
I'm just suggesting that the mayor is concerned about what could happen even if you do a planned approach on Okeechobee. You also have to consider that for Southern. It's going to be 6 lanes, so it's going to have even more, allure as it relates to development. Small suggestions to you.
That's fine. I'm just saying, I don't see this problem with Southern. I don't see it.
Your motion is for both, right?
But I interpret the motion as townwide, LUAs.
Okay. And
It might be refined through the process, and ultimately your ordinance might be more narrowly tailored after planning and zoning board for 2 public hearings, but that's the motion that I interpret.
I wanted to also say, I think it should be townwide, because it's like you squeeze the balloon. As we squeeze the balloon on Okeechobee, it's going to push it farther south. We have some properties that are already zoned commercial. Maybe people ought to try to move to what's already existing compared to more land use changes, which in some cases I think are speculative, where people are just trying to increase the value of their land by getting the land use changed. And, if we went with commercial low office, somebody could have a .2 down there. You could have medical offices that are pretty intense along Southern Boulevard.
Okay, so I think it's safer to do it just, townwide.
No, that's fine. I'm not
And
going
it's limited land use amendments, and it doesn't include those that are already in the pipeline, so it's not.
I'm just commenting.
And I wanted also to.
Tom said, as far as the squeeze of the balloon, we basically have said that. We have said we want Southern Boulevard to be the place we want to go with commercial development. So we're not really changing that by what we're doing, but if we're trying to give ourselves some options to revisit some issues that in the future. But we have already said, squeeze the balloon up here, and Southern's where you're headed. We've said that all along.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We've got 2 public comments. Dennis Lip and Neil.
Thanks for bringing this up, Tom. For the record, Dennis Lip, 1342 North Road. As the chairman of planning and zoning in the LPA, I think this is at the appropriate time. We're going to be able to get this thing done. I think Councilman Rockets, .02, and the mayor's .05, I think those are both things good for debate. One thing I like that in there, I like Mark's idea. I would not call it a second plan, I'd call it an overlay. So I think we really need to think in terms of overlays throughout the town, particularly on that section from the northern part of Citrus down to Southern Boulevard, as opposed to just having it open. Let's see what happens, because we did articulate several times during workshops and visioning sessions, is the Tangerine become our main street and have all commercial come in off of that, as opposed to curb cuts. So, which they wouldn't give us anyway, but I don't think we really want. So I think, and also Councilman Liang had brought up at a previous meeting, what does rural look like? And I think that's something that, going back to a Supreme Court justice when they were discussing pornography, is rural, like pornography when you see it. And I think it's just something that if you envision a cornfield, and then envision a bunch of houses on it, that's not a cornfield anymore. So I think that as we begin to envision what our town looks like along Okeechobee and along Southern, is this what our homes and our yards look like? We've got that .01 house sitting in the middle of 5 acres, and it's nice. And I think that's what our commercial should start trying to look like, particularly on folks that want to put something on Okeechobee. And I like the idea, I said, you only got 3/4 of an acre and you don't want to live in your house anymore, is get a consortium together and turn it into 10 acres. And then maybe on those 10 acres, you can then have 0.5, 0.05, 0.02 shooting range. And it looks nice, and you've got trees, and you've got the setbacks that we all want to see. Because I think that's our opportunity. And I thought about this since I helped start the incorporation committee, because we have just an outstanding opportunity to create something in the town of Los Angeles Groves, which doesn't exist anywhere in Palm Beach County, particularly in the western communities. And it's our opportunity to come up with something where people are going to want to come and set up shop here, because they're not opening up their window and seeing somebody else looking out their window back at them from their little shop. They've got something unique. So I think this is a tremendous opportunity for anyone who wants to come here and establish a business. And I'm looking forward to getting this done.
Thank you, Nina, and then Lawrence. And these are the only ones I've got for this matter.
Nina Gordon E. Road, as you're speaking about squeezing the balloon, I think it's very important that you consider an overall moratorium. The transfer of development rights, if you are considering those and you only have a moratorium on Okeechobee, you will not go on. So for that reason, whatever your options will be more if you do it on. Thank you.
Okay, Lawrence.
I'm rising to speak for the moratorium. I'm actually
Your name and address.
Lawrence Corning, 20 and 34 unit. I'm actually thrilled about what I'm hearing, and the specifics as well that are being brought up, by Grace, Cutney, Goldstein, pretty much everybody. And I'm actually surprised that it's happening so soon. And I understand that you want to continue to sort of finesse with the ULDC. Personally, I think they're flawed, and I think they're difficult. I think it's what's causing this sucked into traffic jam. And the interesting ways of how you're trying to deal with it, where Mr. Cutney's talking about, well, let's try to come and let's group them. Or are you going to connect Okeechobee and Southern? And more the way I'm going is sort of the overlay. These concepts of how to try to the easier way to treasure coasts are coming in. You'd be doing things a little more visually, and I understand the kind of work that you put into the ODCs, but the kind of overlay ideas where you get a concept of what it is you're trying to do. So you're not battling each issue. And I'm also getting the feeling that there is a real genuine desire for rural. Before I had the feeling, well, there's groups that are trying to develop and there are groups that are trying to do this. I'm getting a little bit of a more warm, fuzzy feeling tonight about the genuineness of trying to meet what you had promised from the incorporation committee. So I think that's really positive. In West Palm, when we inducted one of these things, what we got, of course, was a huge rush from the developers to come on, to get in under the water. So if the zoning in progress is something, I can't quite remember whether that was something that you could induct right away to stop this rush or not.
That's the intent. The zoning in progress is active documented steps towards a land development reg. So by taking a motion to specifically say what it is that you're doing, it's in effect as of tonight, and people have notice of that as of tonight. And that's recognized by courts because it does take time to do it the right and legal way and to avoid that rush while you go to P&Z,
So
while you go through the ordinance.
That's really a crucial element. And I do understand that you're going to be working with the ULDCs for a while. I'm suspecting for a while longer. But I think you will find that this structure, while very well-meaning, will be too cumbersome, will cause him to look like a president after 4 years, and you may not get the result you want to do, you know. And I'm not really sure exactly what else I can say that would add anything to it, except that I'm thrilled that we're on this path, because it was looking pretty bleak. And when we're up there and Grace is saying that, look, we have the ULDCs, and you were saying again, you were saying everything tonight that really needed to be said. But when we have to explain why they don't meet these ULDCs, when in fact they do, and they're professionals. I mean, they're going to roll that baby right down the center of the aisle every time. And we're not going to make it because the things that they're moving forward are very suburban, very urban. None of them are meant for here. And another trap you fall into with this older type system that we've adopted from somebody else is that we're dealing with FAR. That's a very typical problem that when you talk to somebody, they'll say, well, that's a typical sand trap, you know. So there is what I'm trying to, there is a conference coming up in West Palm. It's a national, international conference of planners. Very interesting, very thoughtful, very forward-thinking planners that are all coming from around the world to West Palm. And I think it's something that the town should pay for you guys and for the different boards to get to, and we should talk to them. There are new books coming out now about urban agrarians. And most of the classifications, no matter who you talk to, really have us as urban agrarians. And when you did ULDCs, you pulled back a lot of farming rights. And it's not so good for us, but I know you had to do that because you wanted to be able to control a lot of the different little elements in the ULDCs, and you couldn't do that unless you pulled back those rights. So there's a basic conflict that's built into your system. So if you guys can get to this conference, and we can talk to those organizers, and they can create a little educational section just for us, I think it would help the overall thought. It help us move a little farther forward before we become more of a victim to the developers that are going to be coming after this development thing lifts.
Thank you very much. Grace George.
For the record, Grace Joyce, 147th Avenue. I really had no intention of talking tonight because I talked so much on Thursday. But thank you, thank you, thank you. I think we as a land planning agency in a town of concerned citizens have been really hoping that you all, everyone's, staff included, would recognize how important this is. Lawrence mentioned it's not just about FRAs, FAR, because it's not. You also have to take into consideration the parking and the landscaping requirements. And I like the idea of treating Okeechobee Boulevard separately, but I also think we need to limit the acreage amount, because that's some things that communities have a vision, and the next thing you know, there's like blocks and blocks and blocks of assemblages, and you get something which is not what you intended. So I would put a maximum square footage on a parcel that can be developed, in addition to limiting the floor area ratio and all of that other stuff. I'm really excited about this. I'm sure the development folks won't be. Too bad. I do think it's important that we address Southern Boulevard, because while we were sitting up there being presented a conceptual plan of our new development on Southern Boulevard, it terrified me, because it looked like it could be anywhere in any city. The parking area was massive. It did not look rural to me in any way, shape, or form. So I would be concerned about .10 and .20 and the other, this PUD thing that's going to be coming up. I have a grave concern about that as well. So I'm happy that you all recognize what we have been talking about for about a year. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. All right, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, moving to 9B. And that thing took care of 10B also.
Just to keep you up to date on collecting canal, we're going to have this as a regular item. We've explained to you in the past, collecting is a little bit of a different animal than the North Road project. And so just to let you know where we are, we have had our initiated discussions with the Water Control District about the nuances along collecting canal. We're going to schedule a follow-up meeting in the next couple of weeks to understand, part of what needs to go in that process for clarifying the project and what we would possibly need from the district in order to move forward. Once we get that, once we come up with that, then we'll be able to talk about actually doing it in the operations of it. But because it is an important project, we're going to keep it on here to give you regular updates as we go along the process. And hopefully within the next few meetings or so, we're going to be able to put together the task list, so to speak, for that project.
All right. Any questions?
I have a comment, a further comment. I would like to see that as we move forward on collecting canal as a project, that we include a look at that last 400 or 500 feet of North Road by Sunsport as to what it would take to get it done. Not necessarily to say, let's go do it, but if we're looking at and we're lining the ducks up, it's not a monetary
We want
issue.
to include that in our conversation.
Include that in your conversation as to what the steps would be if we were to take that and include that in this next project. Or, if there's any special wrinkles that come up because of that potential option, is it different from North Road and so on? Because as I understand it, it's an easement roadway entirely.
What you're talking about?
That's what section, 400 or 500 feet. But it is as much a thoroughfare for our community as Collecting Canal serves the south and many people that transverse through it, not that live here, but as we do on the north section. But that section now becomes, I think, almost like a stepchild, more than it used to be, in that it's harder logistically to get in there and now grade it because it's only a piece of dirt on the north corner there, and you got to drive almost a mile on Ocean to get there, unless you're coming up E Road. So it's just something that I would like to at least know as you go forward, and we get to a point where we can address that as far as we can do it, or we don't want to do it based on the council's decision, but not to leave it as, you know, an island in itself and not have it available that we can proceed.
That one will incur probably some coordination with Indian Trail, because as soon as you go around the corner, that dirt is theirs.
Yeah.
So, you know, it would not be what's that?
That's our route, we'll make that.
And cut through it, but where it comes out at 140
That's the stop sign.
at the stop sign, there's no pavement right there. The pavement starts to the north. But that right there lining with
40, there's no pavement.
no, 40, there's no pavement. So anyway, okay. All right.
One issue with that part too, and Mark alluded to it, he didn't really go into much detail. With the school, there's a possibility that the boundary change may remove Loxahatchee Groves from that Seminole and move it to Osceola, which would mean that all the people that are currently traveling through there to get to that school wouldn't be doing that, and that would significantly reduce the traffic, I think.
So where's
Osceola is north of the M Canal, west of Seminole Pratt, so it's a little bit farther, but it doesn't require cutting all the way through all Loxahatchee Groves. So that's a question that they have. They're either going to do that or they're going to remove some areas of the acreage from Seminole.
All right.
I mean, that's a to be done, to be determined. I'm just saying, this is.
Yeah, it's they're actively working on it.
Unless we have an objection by the council to keep this kind of in the hip pocket with this other project, then we do, then we just say that's what's just said.
Yeah, it's fine, I think.
So just keep us up to date.
I'll tell you, when I went to Seminole Ridge from my place, in the north end of the town, I still go up, you know, up 140. So if I'm going Osceola, I still see some traffic going that way, because you got to go way south to get east, to get west, and then go north. We don't have any direct routes. We decided against those things. So I would say it's one work, and hopefully it doesn't, I would not want to slow you down, but it's just looking at those things if there's any other wrinkles. The deal with the trails, I would imagine we could do it, and then you tell them, you know, we'd like you to finish off your road to butt up to it, and that's the extent of, if you would, the limitation that we might face.
And that might be all that would be. Because they use blacktop, and they come right after it. With 20, we're talking 20.
Yeah.
Okay, Dennis? Oh, sorry. Ron, go ahead.
I agree with Jim on that, because I've had nothing but compliments now, not complaints, but compliments on North Road. The people like the speed humps, they're definitely twice as good as C Road. The people like the speed humps on D Road. So nothing but compliments, and I ask.
Like them,
Well, they can live with them, and we do need them, but Mark says he hasn't had any complaints, the district hasn't had any complaints on North Road and D Road so far, unless the mayor's complained. I haven't checked with him yet. But I agree with Jim, the road looks nice, and the shame of it all, we got that one section. It looks like, well, we ran out of money, and we just didn't want to finish the job.
That's what it does.
The other thing I wanted to bring up that kind of works with that situation is our alphabet roads, A, B, C, D, whatever. The length are the same except on D Road. D Road goes south of Collecting Canal. I would like to have a consensus that we think about doing, when we do come across Collecting Canal, I would like to see us go from Collecting Canal to Southern Boulevard. That would cut the cost down, because the people that live on South D Road, if they ever get their road Outram, they're going to have to pay more because they've got another section of road that the other roads don't have. And we talk about being fair with the people. Well, if the town can take care of D Road, Collecting Canal to Southern Boulevard, that'll keep the cost about the same range as far as A, B, C, D, and F Road and stuff. So I'd like for us to consider that. The other thing is, I've talked to town management and fleet, but it's a shame when you ride by D Road on Southern Boulevard, we don't have nothing but a dust bowl. The dust bowl goes all the way over here to the plaza. It goes to the post office. I mean, if we're gonna if we're gonna improve our town and stuff and make it decent for people to come here, then let's think about at least doing the main street. We've got the forestry down on Fleckley Canal at D Road. They eat that dust all day long. They don't get paid enough to do the job they do, and we still have plenty of brush and woods out here for them to protect. So I'd like to see us have a consensus on what I call South D Road tonight, if possible.
Get it done.
At least come up with some cost and
All right, and, yeah, Clete? Yeah.
Clete Sonia, Los Angeles Groves, Water Control District. Point of clarification on the part of the road that looks like we stopped and ran out of money. I mean on D Road. I did get I got an email and a phone call.
No, I don't think they're talking about that one, Clete. They're talking about there by Sunsport.
The Sunsport section.
Oh, well, I do need to clarify that.
Okay.
No, we did not run out of money, and yes, we are going to complete D Road. It's just that is the access road that the contractor is using to get to a staging area. So if we had put that material down now, it would have torn it all up by now. So that's why it's not being done yet until everything is done. Regarding the speed humps, caution. The design requirements of the drawings are to be complied with per the Board of Supervisors and the engineering consultant. And what is on North Road isn't been undetermined yet whether or not those meet the template requirements of that speed hump design. So everybody might like the humps on North Road, but those humps may be shallower than what the speed reduction requirements are in a traffic calming hump. So I'm just letting you know that there might be an additional material put on some of those humps on North Road because the design speed is in excess of 40 miles an hour going over those humps.
so I got a question before you leave.
Okay?
The town should have a big say-so when it comes to speed control in the town of Los Angeles, signs, humps, whatever. Now, I would like to have a consensus of this board tonight, okay? I personally, and I think the residents, they like those speed humps on North Road, they like them on D Road. I spoke with your supervisors, and they didn't want to take the monkey off your back, they wanted to keep it on your back. But they could have made the decision and told you, hey, the speed bumps, the residents like them, leave them alone, but they didn't. But I'll be at them at the next board meeting to see if they can change their mind. But I would like to have a consensus of this council of what we would like as far as those speed humps goes, because I do believe that those speed humps will be built up, and then we'll have more complaints about that. I realize where Clete's coming from, and that's his job as an engineer, and I don't hold that against him. But us as council members and supervisors on the water control district, they can listen to his reasoning, but they can make their own decisions on what they want for the people. Now, I personally think the rougher these speed humps get, we're penalizing our own residents because we're trying to slow outsiders down and cut through people down. Now, I believe as a town, we've gotten to the point where instead of making the roughest speed humps in Palm Beach County, that we can hire PBSO to cite speeding tickets. We can drop the speed limit down to 25 so that if somebody gets caught doing 30 or 35, their parents, it hurts their pocket a little bit more. And that's the changes that we need to make. But we don't need to take the benefits of our own residents having a decent road with decent speed humps because of people that abuse our town.
It is my understanding, if I can answer that real quick, that the board has directed me to go out on my recommendation and measure template every single speed hump out here and see if it complies with that template design. Not necessarily make the changes right away, but report on whether or not they're conforming to that template design. There is a tolerance of ½ an inch, plus or minus, shallow or more, than the template requirements are. So, just to clarify, the board did not take, as you said, I'm supposed to keep the monkey on my back. That's my job. The board is not responsible for taking that off my back. That's what I'm paid to do, is to advise them what they need to do. So thank you for your personal support, Mr. Gerald, but that is part of my job.
All right, and the last question for you to think about, the speed humps on South Sea Road and North Sea Road, do they make the template?
We don't know yet.
Okay, all right.
We're in the process.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Just one thing to reinforce what Councilman Gerald just said, and I guess it's worth mentioning now. From my understanding, there was no consideration of the town's jurisdiction over speed on our roads that was built into the OGM of the roads. I think it's just kind of overlooked. But when you get townspeople coming to the council and saying, we don't like certain things, they don't make sense, what happened to the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit? I can only go 12. I've made those comments personally, or as a resident and business owner. I think it's important, and from what I've understood, talking to the staff, that the town has jurisdiction over speed. And if you put a device in that slows speed below or changes the speed limit, you need the town to approve that or direct such a change. Now, it's not been done. I think Councilman Gerald is trying to do it in a nicer way than he's known to be a little nicer than I am. Is to say, we don't want those speed humps changed, and if you're going to make them the speed less than our stated 30-mile-an-hour speed, then you need to come to the council and ask. And so I would say to our administrator that when you go back to this water control district and you tell them your results of what you find, that you might build into that somehow conversation that the town council, I'm thinking we can get maybe a consensus here, likes the fact we have a North Road that seems to be acceptable to the parties that are using it, and it's not like Sea Road, which is where I have to work on, is unacceptable. And I made mention at the last Water Control District meeting that I think the design is flawed. I think if you're talking about a four-wheel drive car, short wheelbase, that's one thing. If you're talking about Waxahachie Groves and not downtown West Palm or a subdivision off of in town where you have houses next to each other, you shake hands if you want to reach out your windows, those roads are a whole different set of stories of what we have in Waxahachie Groves. You've got dualies, you've got the fact that we ignored completely that we have a number of nurseries out here that have a very common vehicle called a box truck. It's big, it's square, and we usually have to pull over, let people by on any of the roads in the past. The nice thing about it nowadays is almost like there's a little wider road and we can seem to squeeze by it. A lot of people seem to make it, but this idea that we will have an average speed of 30, so we can make a speed hump that can make you go 15 or 20 or 25, but you can speed up in between and then you get an average. I still like to be able to use that argument in the court of law when I'm told I'm speeding.
Right.
Because I can only say, officer, I was only going 30. But you were going 45 in this section. Well, it's 30 on average. So I don't hide this fact that, we have just kind of, it's been, we've acquiesced, so to speak, but now I'm bringing it up because now we're getting down to change these humps on North Road, don't do it. And I'd like the council support to say, let's have the Water Control District, bring it back to us. I know it was designed that way, Clete. I'm not arguing with that point that the engineer in you did a great job. But when it comes to the speed hump in terms of practicality and driving these roads, and I'll give you 3 vehicles, you can drive all 3 any one day, and you will clip a sign that says on Sea Road North, you'll hit the side of the truck with it. You seem to forget that there's big vehicles and they have side view mirrors that extend well out away from, but the truck itself, the physical size of the truck, it'll clip those signs on North Sea Road. And I asked the Water Control District, I said, just angle. I got a 30-mile-an-hour sign, it just angle. It may not be what they do in downtown West Palm Beach, but you can sure do it out in the country. And nobody's going to complain about it. It'll be out of the way. So I kind of stand for the right of the town that we should not be messing with these speed humps if they're not being complained about, and we need to reassess whether you can make a speed change without the town's council approval.
I would also support what Jim said and what Ron said, and if it's necessary to make a motion to suggest that they not adjust them, and in fact, adjust the C roadways to comply, that's what we do.
All right. Do you want to make a motion?
I would make a motion to that effect because it's really been way blown out of proportion in the town, and things have gotten way out of control over something that people should just listen and react. So I would suggest that the C road be the C road speed humps be lessened, and that no further additions be made to the speed humps.
Okay.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. It's going to go to them as a recommendation, correct?
That's a requirement.
Well,
It's
but anyway.
well, that is a question which we really do need to talk about
And
because,
now when we went up, then we come up. Oh, I mean,
trust me,
you're making the motion, so I mean, I'm fine with whatever you want to make.
Motion-
Let's go with
motion is
that.
made.
We got a plus or minus of an inch, so let's go with that. That's 2 inches, so let's go with the lower side. Anyway. All right, we have a motion and a second. Council members, any other discussion? We beat this to death. Dennis left, and then I've got John Ryan.
For the record, Dennis left 13402 North Road. Did anybody have to catch Channel 5 News tonight?
Yeah.
I think somebody, who's got an opposite opinion may want to contact the news channel and have them air something else, which talks about the number of lives that have not lost on our dirt roads and canals. And just on, it's back when I was sitting on the council, is the issue of speed control. That's why we get the gas tax money. And we're not the only ones getting the gas tax money. So I think if the people receiving the gas tax money have got to listen to the folks that have the legislative responsibility for setting the speeds on our roads.
Sure. Okay, John Ryan.
John Ryan, 3508 A Road. I think that this is going to be an interesting problem to work our way out of. I've probably read more background literature than most people on what we did as the water control district and what your considerations are. I think we made it clear that the town is responsible for traffic control, which is setting speed limits. However, the roads are responsibility at this point of the water control district. Speed humps are not traffic control devices. Logically, they probably fit all the requirements of logically being speed control devices. But legally, they are not in the manual that everybody adopts. Uniform traffic control manual. They're not traffic control devices. They're called physical road features or traffic calming features. So I think the dilemma is two sides. One, the speed desired in the roads and the purpose of the humps to keep people out of the canals because we can't afford the guardrails. I agree with Jim that 30 miles an hour is tough to reconcile with most of the speed humps. But tonight when I was coming over here, on A Road, which has, I think, decent humps, car passed me going at least 40 miles an hour. He went over the humps. I figured that, well, at least he's going to know he's going over something. It didn't slow him down. Most people do slow down. I think that the town, wants to push the position. I think you're going to have public support to minimize the humps. I think you're going to have less traffic control. I think what it'll come down to is that the Board of Supervisors will ask the town to take the full legal responsibility. But I think that we adopted the design to do our best to control the speed and keep people out of the canals. And to the extent that we make these humps easy to use and get over, we're going to lessen that. So I think that's where the decision is going to come down, and that's where I think there should be a lot of discussion before there's any attempt to really change the design at this point.
John, hold on a minute. I got a question for you. First of all, I agree with you. I think it's time us as a council, in other words, to take the monkey off y'all's back, okay? If you want to, I think we need to step up to the plate and accept the responsibility as far as liability or whatever you want to call it. But the truth is the matter, you made a comment that somebody passed you doing 40. So it doesn't matter whether we've got 5-mile-an-hour speed humps. The maniacs are going to do what they want to on our roads. And the only way we're going to stop them is by citation for PBSO, by paying PBSO to put a stop to it, by reducing the speed limit so when we stop it to them, we can hit them hard in their wallet. But no, I'd like consensus tonight. If you guys want to turn the liability over to the town, and you know, I'd like to know how many people are willing to do that on this board, or if we want to put the monkey, keep the monkey on your back.
Tell you what, one of the things we want to be careful of in here is if we agendize items we're going to have. If we've already got about 3 things that are not on the agenda, we get in a habit of voting for things, bringing up and voting for things at these meetings that are not on this agenda. We're going to have a lot of ticked off residents because they're going to think that we tried to sneak something by them. So we want to be careful. We put it on the agenda, we discuss it right, and we do it
My
right.
comments were mainly to follow up and focus the discussion, and I think it will be a discussion in the future. And I think there's no getting around that the berms that we have on the roads, they're not going to stop anybody from going.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Mayor, a comment, I would agree with Mr. Ryan entirely. We should take over responsibility for the roads, and they should turn them over to us. I've been saying that for a while. I'm glad to see he agrees with me. Now, as to our motion, could we vote on that, please?
Yeah, we haven't voted. Any further discussion?
I have one other comment.
Okay.
We keep saying the size of our speed bumps is going to encourage or discourage people going in the canal. How many years have we had dirt roads? We've improved the dang on roads. We put a surface on there that when you hit your brakes, you might stop. I'm not against speed bumps, but we can't seem to forget that resurfacing a road added a tremendous layer of safety. You know, I don't know how many times, but I've had too many times where I'm going down the road and there's somebody coming the other way and I'm on a canal. They don't want to stop and I don't have any roadway. I hit my brakes and I go towards them, right away from them, but I don't stop. So we've added a surface on these roads that has tremendous improvement in safety. Then we say we're pointing at speed hump and saying, well, our liability is, we're making people speed, or it is not. Whatever we added to that road was just that, an addition. It's not adding to the liability, or it's not putting us more at risk because of suit because we didn't do it right. We're talking about the town's people and what they have been telling us, and as a council, we need to listen to that, and we need to address it, and it's right within our responsibility, area of responsibility and authority. If you don't call us a speed hump, whatever you want to call it, it regulates speed. That's why it's called speed hump. So, anyway.
Okay.
And I would agree with Jim. The idea that because people speed, that we take responsibility for what happens to them is absurd. Every issue that comes up with people being in the canal has to do with them driving in an improper way, either recklessly or too fast or whatever. Somebody who isn't even licensed to driving the vehicle has no business being in it. That's the problems we have. And to say that somehow the town has a responsibility for that is an example of what's wrong with this country, that people feel that they can do idiotic things and then other people should take the responsibility for them. And I don't see why we should, and we shouldn't buy into that, you know what.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second.
Actually, could you repeat the motion? We talked so much about
To not adjust the speed humps and to adjust the ones on C Road to comply. Vice Mayor, second the motion.
Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passed. All right, moving on to C, 9C.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, This is just to basically give you a report. On April 2nd, the Palm Beach County lobbying registration ordinance came into effect. What that requires is it puts in some additional regulations that apply to the town because we're subject to the county's ordinance. The county has a centralized registration system for lobbyists. Unless the town opts out of it and does its own registration system for lobbyists, then anybody who is a lobbyist and wants to lobby within the town will register on the county system. And it's searchable by anybody. They have to identify that they are lobbying within the town of Waxahachie Grove. But even if you have the option of opting out and doing your own, but talking with the town manager, we've got a recommendation at this point that you not do that, put your own system in place. The county has one that's accessible by the internet, and it's already set up. There's a registration fee of $25, I believe, for them to do that. There's no onus on you to register, it's the onus on the lobbyists to do so before they quote-unquote lobby. They didn't change any definitions of lobbyists, it's the same that's been in place. The second part, though, that is a town requirement that we have put in place is what's called a contact law. We're required if someone comes to the town to talk with you on town business in lobbying, that they put that, we keep a log of that contact. And so the county has provided the form to the town. We have the form, we'll keep that log if lobbyists come to lobby to the town offices. Interestingly, if that lobbying activity takes place outside of town offices, the responsibility is on the lobbyists to call the town manager, so the town manager can then complete that log. So there's nothing for you to do. Okay, but that's in effect as of April 2nd. But again, there's no action you need to take, that's in effect. The third major component of the ordinance that came into effect is the component of silence on competitive selection for procurement. And that is now composed, although you in essence had it with your ethics ordinance, from the point of when the bids are, the deadline for bid submission until the process ends, either with a selection or rejection of all bids or some other action taken ended. So anybody who submits to do business at the threshold where we have to do competitive selection is required to comply with that cone of silence, and a violation of that makes the contract voidable. Not void, which means it never legally existed, but voidable, which means if you learn about that, you can undo that contract. It's important to understand that because we're required now when we put our procurement documents out to include both the reference that there is a cone of silence and a reference to the county ordinance and all of it. But it only applies to the ones when we reach that purchasing threshold that we have to do competitive selection. If it's below that, the cone of silence doesn't apply because you're not going through competitive selection. The last thing Mark loves is that if there's a preliminary indication there might be a violation of his ordinance, he's responsible for looking into it. If he thinks there's a possibility of a violation, he's required to turn it over to the Palm Beach Commission on Ethics. So if he gets a complaint about a possible violation, say somebody lobbying without registering, or somebody violating, which is the main violation of it, and he will look into it. And if it turns out that something occurred, a lobbyist had lobbied without registering, he will then take the next step and turn it over for review by the commission. So I have a memo which we'll provide to you all, to the clerk, and anybody can read it, but it outlines in essence what I just went through, but there's no action that you need to take this evening. But I just want to make you aware of those new steps and requirements effective April 2nd.
All right, any questions for Blake?
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 10A.
Our legal staff, we did some checking into, I made a comment at a few council meetings, recommendation that we put a $2,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of anybody vandalizing our road or vandalizing our homes in Waxahachie. We found out through PBS, so Lieutenant Combs was a lot of help, and a sergeant with Crime Stoppers, but basically the only way the town can do something that would possibly work is through Crime Stoppers. And I brought in a contract, and what I'd like to do is, if we could let Mark handle it, I'd like for us to do a contract with Crime Stoppers, put up they call it a donation, but at the end of the year, if we don't use it the way I understand it, and Mark can clarify everything through Crime Stoppers, but if we don't use it, we get the money back.
but I'd like for us to put up a $2,000 reward in the fund with Crime Stoppers. I'd like for us to do a contract with them and get the ball rolling. I think when outsiders and even residents of Loxahatchee, when they realize that we're willing to pay to catch these people that are tearing our property up, our homes up, and our roads up, I think it's going to cease. $2,000 is not too much for us to put out, and basically the best way to go through it is through Crime Stoppers, and they've got a good reputation. They don't always get a conviction, but most of the time they'll get an arrest. When that person gets arrested, trust me, they think hard the second time. If they get off the first time, they think pretty hard the second time and consider themselves lucky. So I make a motion that we do a contract with Crime Stoppers, putting up a $2,000 reward into their fund to do this project.
How many times a year does that come up?
Well, they've got a contract here that says donation 90 days, 180 days, 365. I'd like to do it on a yearly basis. And basically, if we had enough arrests where we used the $2,000, I would think that management could come back to the council and say, hey, you know, we've had this many arrests, they've been prosecuted or whatever, and then we could put more funds into it. But I'd like to at least start out with $2,000.
Does that include dumping and all that stuff?
Well, see, that's what I was gonna say. The crime was for vandalism or damage to the road, the newly surfaced roadways.
Right, and we can't start worrying about everything. I believe we've got
if it's criminal vandalism.
Right. I'm more interested in people vandalizing the homes and the roads in Loxahatchee. When it comes to dumping and stuff, we've got already a process that PBSO handles that. So.
Okay, now we're talking roads, or we're talking homes, or both?
No, we're talking about.
Are you talking about damaging the roads?
Right.
Because you said homes and roads, and I just want to make sure that we get it right in here. Because
right,
what this
no.
allows you to do is designate that $2,000 for a specific crime that you're looking to address. In most cases, it's already occurred as a date for the reward, but in this case, it would be for arrests or convictions of the crime of criminal vandalism or damage to public property related to the roads, the resurfaced roads.
Well, yeah, I want the roads covered, but I want the residents covered too. The crime level in Loxahatchee, believe it or not, Lieutenant Combs does not have, our level is low here in Loxahatchee. The acreage is going above and beyond, and it's getting worse and worse. And so, how we can do it, we can protect our residents and our roads. In other words, I'm worried about vandalism into the home, breaking into the homes. We've got foreclosures and stuff out here.
Well, I'm just concerned that because when you give them that and they operate it, they need to have a clear understanding that if someone comes in and says, you know, so-and-so broke the window at such and such house, are they eligible for the town's award?
No, according to the Crime Stoppers, the only way they're eligible for the reward is somebody is arrested.
Well, no, they can't.
You should be arrested.
Well, they changed that. Used to it was and convicted, but Crime Stoppers statewide or United States wide, they can't always convict them. So they've taken that out of there. In other words, what they can do is they can arrest them, put them through the process, but they can't guarantee you a conviction. And when it comes to the reward, there may be 2 or 3 people that called in the same problem. So what they would do is they would split it, but they've got to be arrested. And that's another thing. If we run into a problem where people get arrested and we can't get no convictions, then we can discontinue it. But we've got to start somewhere.
I mean, that's, again, I'm not trying to be difficult, just trying to make sure we understand what we're doing. Because there's a blank in here, it says, which we're responsible for filling in. It says, because I read the form, I got it this evening, I read the form, and there's nothing legally offensive in it. It's pretty, you have options for the length that you want this fund to remain, and you could choose if at the end of the year it comes back to the town or stays with them as a donation. I'm hearing you want it to come back to the town, which is appropriate, and for a year. But the issue that we need direction on is what is it that it's set up for, a reward for? Is it any vandalism within the town's boundaries? Is it any crime within the town's boundary? Is it limited to destruction of public property, which is probably when you're going to, you're talking about public purpose here. But we just need something, we need some clear direction from the council what this intended to do.
Well, let's go with something that'll cover the most that you're satisfied legally. This started out because of the vandalism of the road. In other words, people tearing up our roads. And I noticed we've had some signs torn down since the new roads have been put in. So I personally would make it public property. I think it's going to cover more.
Yeah, I mean, if it's damage or vandalism or damage to public property within the town of Waxahachie Groves, that could be it could be even the district property, in essence.
That would not cover private property.
No, it would not.
No, not homes.
Not cover private property, but if something was damaged, roads were taken, or signs were ripped out of the ground, or speed humps intentionally removed, or damage done to the point where it's a criminal offense, then this would kick in.
So the guy out there grinding the top of speed humps might get $2,000.
If it's criminal, right? If it's malicious vandalism, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
It could get a call
it
from
wouldn't be
crime
malicious, it would be beneficial.
Let's start with public and keep it simple. See how
Vandalism or damage to public property within the town of Waxahachie Groves. Does that make sense, council?
Yes.
And you want to make all 2,000 goes at once, or are you going to divvy that up per occurrence?
$1.
Well, you can
now you're making it complicated. In other words,
It's already more complicated than that. We've had one incident as far back as we can look at, except for some signs.
You don't want the first one to come through and get your whole,
Right.
do you? So you want to do up to something per incident?
Well, to me, it would be according to the damage. In other words, but I, somebody come up with an idea.
Maybe we split it, $1,000 per day. That's pretty sizable.
I'm afraid you're going to get 2 neighbors, so I'll report you this week.
That's right.
You report me next week, we'll split the money. Yeah, and use the signs to patch our airboat. That's where all the stop signs went for years. Come on, the buggies.
Councilman Jarrell, I think it's a well-intended thing. Let's go ahead and move forward on it.
Okay. We have a motion that will offer a $2,000 reward, right? For any acts of vandalism against public property along Section 10.
And it's for a year, which then at the end of the year, if it's not used, it reverts back to the town.
Okay.
Do you want to direct the town manager, or do you want to bring it back?
I think direct the town manager to exercise this form. It's acceptable to the town attorney.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Okay. Brian, second. Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Whatever. Okay, passes 5-0. All right. One of the things along that line, and I'll be honest with you, 32 years ago when I moved out here, the LLA had a little sign that went on properties of people that belonged to the Waxahachie Landowners Association back then. And it said there was a $500 fine paid by the Landowners Association for anybody that vandalized the property of any landowner that belonged to the LLA or the Waxahachie Grove. And it was kind of neat because it kind of reminded me of the old vigilante signs back in the West. But anyway, okay. Moving on to 10C, ozone repair and maintenance. Ron?
I apologize for the short notice, but this past couple weeks, we've had complaints come in about F Road. Potholes in F Road are getting worse. Nobody wants to seem to fix them. But I've got 3 estimates here. For an example, South F Road, South F Road, North F Road, Compton Road, and Bryan Road. The ozone or the pavement was put down by the county. It did not cost the town anything. It did not cost the Water Control District anything. Now, all that was free. Now, we as a town, we've got the gas tax funds coming in. We need to maintain what we have. Some people say, well, hey, I'm still riding on a dirt road. Well, hopefully someday your road, if you want it, will be paved. But we have to maintain to cut the costs down for the future. Now, South F Road cost $189,000. We did not pay for that. The county paid for it. So I've got 3 estimates here. North and South F Road, repairing the potholes and repairing, I don't know if I was going to ask Cleet to speak on it, but it basically describes what needs to be done. But F Road, for an example, and I believe it's almost 2 miles south of Okie, 2 miles north of Okie. We're talking $26,676 to bring that road up to par. All right. For Compton Road, we're talking $25,176 to bring Compton back up to par. Now, one of the worst roads, as far as I'm concerned, is Bryan's Road. It's 2 situations with Compton and Bryan's. People use those roads for cut-throughs. In other words, instead of getting out on, or instead of trying to get out on Okeechobee Boulevard in the morning, you've got people on South F Road, the west side of the canals, cutting through Bryan's Road. Not only are they using it for a cut-through, but there's no speed humps and stuff on Bryan's Road, so they're abusing the heck out of it. Same thing with Compton. When we have accidents at Folsom and Okeechobee, or anywhere in that area, Red Barn or wherever it might be, they use Compton for a drive-around road, and they use Bryan Road for the same thing. I believe that we've been in town for 6 years. I believe we've probably collected enough gas tax money from these 3 roads to where actually if they would be getting their money back. Somebody could figure that out, but I'm pretty sure after 6 years we've probably collected enough to pay for it and have a lot left over. So I'd like to see, and the thing about it is, later on in public comments I got something to say about it. We've got people that say they, since we've become a town, they just don't see any improvement, like that. They don't see their tax dollars being spent for anything. Well, I never asked them if they were blind or not, but just on my road alone, A Road, it's beautiful to get on that paved road now and not have people run me over or dust where I can't see where I'm going and things like that. I see a lot of improvement, and I see a lot of improvement hopefully that we can do this year in 2012, where the taxpayers will feel like they're getting their tax dollars back. So I'll make a motion.
You didn't give us a price and right.
Okay. Bryan Road is $26,676, and F Road, and I'm assuming this is north and south, is $25,176.
That was Compton.
Oh, no, that was Compton, I'm sorry. And, okay, F Road is pothole patch repair and fog seal. In other words, they'll seal the road, and that's $19,925.40.
What's the description of the other repairs?
Let me just read it to you. Compton Road resurfacing will require some work to bring it up to standards and to help it last another 7 to 10 years. And that's what I'm looking at. How long is it going to last if we put this money out? This road was coal mixed some 20 years ago, and it's fallen, first of all, it's fallen apart. We recommend the following: 30 tons of leveling using our micro material, then pave over the top of that with a 1/2 inch or 1 inch 30-pound lift for microsurfacing. Cleet can help me out better with this. Basically, I know that it's going to make it a new road that should last, if I'm reading this right, 7 to 10 years. And that's what I'm looking at as a council member. How long is it going to last us if we put out this much money?
Speed humps on that one?
No, it doesn't say anything about speed humps, but it would be very beneficial to the residents if we put speed humps in. I mean, it would make it safer for them, and it might deter a lot of people that just use it because they can fly from one road to the other. And the thing about these roads, you don't have to put the speed humps 500 feet apart. In other words, they don't have canals on either side of the road. So if you put 2 or 3 speed humps in to space them out on the road, at least it would be a start, and we can see how that works. So we don't have to put them every 500. And I think if we were gonna do a job, we'd try and do it right to make it. And also the speed humps will, if they say it'll last us 7 to 10 years, with speed humps, it should last longer, because that's gonna slow people down. Thank you for bringing that up, Dennis.
Okay, so roughly we're looking at $72,000 for the three projects.
Yeah, can I clarify, this is being done by the district through our agreement with the district for road maintenance, or are we doing these projects?
Well, as far as F-Road goes, we're giving the district so much money. Now, if I understood Clete right, this would, we would be paying them back except for F-Road. The F-Road project, because Compton Road and Bryan Road is town roads, but F-Road is still a district road. And so they would be taking that cost out of the $150,000 that we're giving them in a local agreement. In other words, we as a town, I believe, we kind of split our gas tax funds with the district, because half of the mileage in Loxahatchee is district roads, half is non-district roads. So the money we're giving them for their mileage, that money could be used to do F-Road.
That would be up to them.
Right. Well, I spoke with Clete earlier, and Bill, if Clete was back there, he might could help us out. But I think, and Mark, you were with us. Was that your understanding?
That was my understanding, but I would just caution the council, I think you're probably better off, if you want to make this expenditure, using it under the CIP as opposed to gas taxes. Right now, downtown management has some concerns about the gas tax and its use. So I recommend that actually, you take it out of the CIP.
Okay.
And actually, Mayor, I think that it's somewhat premature because the CIP conversation is supposed to come up in the next meeting or so, and rather than using all that up before we get there, I think we ought to look at it, in coordination with the other projects that maybe necessary. I'm not commenting on the propriety of these projects. I think they do rank, and there's something we need to look at. But we need to look at the ranking rather than just whoever comes up with something first.
Right. Now, I don't understand why this wouldn't come out of gas tax. Because I would think this would be a perfect place to put the gas tax money.
Would you want to run?
I mean, it's road, we've got money sitting in that account.
And the honor from Mr. Underwood,
Okay.
He's raised the concern about gas tax, which was, at first I've heard of it this evening.
Okay.
One comment to answer Ron's question. He asked if we had 6 years of gas tax for half-mile road. You're talking about you've accumulated 17.5 thousand in 6 years on half-mile.
On a half mile, okay.
Which is what you would talk about in terms of Brian's half-mile.
Yeah, Bill.
Mayor, Council, Bill Underwood, Underwood Management Services. Basically, the reason and the attorney doesn't know, in 2010, the city of Miami was trying to get a ruling on using 5 and 6 cent gas tax. The response they got from the Attorney General was, it is not eligible for the type of work that you're referring to now. Subsequent to that, I believe Palm Beach County, in their 2012 legislative ambition to get the legislature to pass a bill, was to have language inserted into Chapter 3 through 6 that actually says it can be used for maintenance and repair and everything that everybody's been doing for, that I've been doing for 30 years. This was the result of a 2010 act or opinion by the Attorney General, and I realize all attorneys have opinions and they can all be overturned. I would suspect, though, the city of Miami has much more vested and would take it to task before the town of Loxahatchee Grove and take it through the system to get it adjudicated one way or the other. At the present time, my position would be about some adjudication, and there was legislation, it was Senate Bill 1768 that was offered and went into 2 committees, and both committees killed the bill before it got out. And that in that bill, it had language to clarify the use of those funds so that we could use it for exactly what Councilman Gerald is referring to. And an abundance of caution, that's the only reason I bring it up, is it's about $75,000 that maybe you would want to consider taking it from another source, other than gas tax until that can be resolved.
How about our question, how about our discussion about collecting canal?
Same scenario.
Same scenario.
So we can't use gas tax for that either?
If what happens, if it's capital improvement, the town books it as a capital asset, and yes, you can do it for a capital improvement process if it's enhancing the roadway throughput.
So we can use gas tax to pay for North Road, correct?
I believe you can. But we will be booking it on your books as an asset.
I mean, it totally changes my idea of a lot of these things. You know, because, gas tax money we can't use for anything else, but there are other money we can use for other projects we've got in the pipeline. And if we burn up our money that we have for other projects doing roads, and we can't use the gas tax on the roads.
But you can use the
Strange situation.
You can use gas tax for capital projects.
Building things.
Huh?
Mr. Mayor. And I think the point he's bringing up here is these capital assets become our assets. When we build the road, they are our roads, is what you're referring to.
When you fund it, it's yours.
And that's something that I think we do have to work out, because we're talking about North Road, we're talking about F Road, which are not technically our roads. They're not the town's roads, they're the district roads. So if we're going to use the gas tax money on the district roads, you're telling us that those need to be then turned over to us as our capital asset.
What I'm saying is that we're going to put it on your books as your asset. How we're going to actually quantify it, we know we're going to quantify at least the value of the material that's put down.
Mr. Mayor, can I recommend, I mean, maybe not designate the source, I understand, and I can look at the issue with Mr. Underwood, and see what has changed with the gas tax. And I understand if Miami asked for an opinion, and they got an opinion, they're bound by that opinion. And that's the law when you ask for an APO. Because everybody else, it's an opinion. So I need to look at that opinion and see, and I'm not saying I disagree per se, I just would like, before we make any fundamental policy shifts, let us go back and take a look at it and confirm what the current status is based on what we've been doing historically for,
I've been doing it for 30 years.
For 30 years.
Yeah, no man.
I'm not quite that ancient, but for as long as I can recall. All kidding aside, let us go back, because it's a very important issue to the council, and it's a form the basis of how we've been doing things in conjunction with the district, for as long as I've been doing work here for the town. So let us go back and take a look at it. We can consult with the district as well if we see issues on how our relationship is with any use of gas tax. There's different gas taxes, and one of them, I think the 7th cent, was you can only use, remember we had this issue, you can only use it for public transportation. We had to see if we get a waiver from that, so we could use it for non-public transportation.
Right.
I didn't remember the.
It was a 6 cent. It was a 6 cent tax,
Right.
as I recall. We had it, but it was a Palm Beach County designation.
Yeah,
we got a waiver.
we got a waiver. So each different tax has a different purpose and different limitations and permutations and stuff. So let us take some time over the next couple weeks to refine that.
All right, so we all right to wait until they come back with a...
So let me suggest that Ron, I think, is looking for a hole to be filled, at least.
No, here's the situation we've got.
You know what you're talking about?
Well, please can clarify this. First of all, the contractor that's in here today doing the Ocean project, he can do these projects while he's here, right? Okay, now, legally, we can do these projects because the price is not like collecting canal was. In other words, it doesn't go out of the limits. So even if we take 75,000, if we throw in speed humps and make it safer for the residents, we're taking 75,000 out of a capital improvement budget of 1 million. Now how long are we going to hoard this money and hold on to it? I mean, if 75,000 is going to make these roads look good, and hopefully they'll hold up 7 to 10 years. And our taxpayers, while we're trying to make up our mind how we're gonna spend this money, at least our taxpayers that ride on these roads will see at least $75,000 out of their $1 million capital improvement fund spent.
All right, we have two issues. One is how you pay for it, and two, do we want to just do it? So, separate issue, right? Go.
I could encourage council to consider, you do have funds in the contingency.
Exactly where I was gonna go.
You
We could use that designation.
use in that direction.
And it doesn't matter to me where we get it from, as long as we spend it.
As long as we spend it. Boy, that sounds like a lot of government entity.
On the taxpayers, I should have said.
Let's go to Las Vegas then.
Yeah, that's why I clarified, only on our residents.
We're putting,
You know, just so I understand, we're putting $75,000 of our taxpayers' money on roads that were paved that didn't cost those residents a dime because they were done for free by the county. And other roads are on dirt roads that haven't been improved at all, and we're gonna put $75,000 in that. And I mean, I wanna be fair, and I want people to see a result for their money. But at the same time, I see other uses out here, I think, that we need to prioritize, like Tom says, and put them together and figure out who needs what the worst. And, you know, so anyway, I mean, that's kind of my thought. Brian?
Yeah, also I also mentioned last time when Ron brought up like the canal, I'm not against these projects that he's bringing up. I'm more concerned, you know, every time we bring up a project to do, we're chipping away at the $1 million. $1 million sounds like a lot, but in the big scheme of things, it really isn't. Like I mentioned, the traffic light can easily cost over $1 million, easily. And we still have a lot of other projects that we want to get done. So we need to figure out the financing, prioritize our projects, and before we just go ahead and start spending away our money, let's have a better plan. I mean, we want to get all these things done, but we want to be able to have enough money to get all these things done too.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I've got two public comments.
I'm sorry, there is no motion.
There's no motion on this one?
No, there is no motion.
All right. Someone we're going to make a motion?
One last comment before I make the motion. I mean, we've got problems on these roads. They're getting worse by the month. They're getting worse by the year. We've got the money to maintain them. These people have basically earned the money through the gas tax dollars. How can we justify, it doesn't matter whether they got $189,000 free for South F Road. That saved the taxpayers $189,000 in Loxahatchee. We can't hold that against them because they got it for nothing. It saved us $189,000. Now, we're not willing to maintain that road after we get it down. I mean, where are we coming from here? I mean, when we put the ozone and stuff down on these roads, do we plan on maintaining them, or do we plan on doing every road before we fix the problems we have? For $75,000, we can bring these roads up to par for 7 to 10 years. That'll save us money a year from now. The cost will only be more. And when you talk about prioritizing, when are we going to prioritize before we start spending some money? All we're doing is thinking about spending money. Supposedly we've got a list, but we're not spending any money. I mean, our budget came in October or whatever, and here it is, we're working on finishing up April, and we're still thinking about spending money. This is a simple solution, putting money back into Loxahatchee where you can see it every day if you want to ride on these roads. And now's the opportune time when the contractor is here. You bring another contractor in 6 months from now, it's not going to cost the same amount today. It's going to cost more. So, you know, if $75,000 is going to kill us to help the residents on these roads, then
We're in trouble.
we're in trouble. But I'll make a motion that we approve these 3 things to bring these roads up to par. And whatever fund we need, the contingency fund, if you're worried about the capital improvement and spending our money out, then let's take it out of the contingency fund. I mean, we got millions of dollars. Let's do something constructive for the residents here in Loxahatchee.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion by council members?
Yeah, a couple of comments. We just spent, I think, a bunch of money on North Road, so we are spending some.
Oh, no, and the people like it, and the people are, but I've got emails here where we've got people out there that think that we're hoarding their money, we're not doing anything for Loxahatchee. But I see it, and to do these 3 roads, that's only gonna show people a little bit more of what we've done to make their life a little bit better.
I like to take the time to spend it wisely, we're allowed to spend it because we have it. But we did North Road, and I think it's been, we know we have to take some time to do Collecting Canal, because we need to do it right, so.
We did North Road, or we did Second Street.
We're doing some things, and I just think it just takes, Ron, I think, to not say we've been saying that we're doing nothing, we're forgetting a couple things, but yeah, there's a lot more we can do.
No, it was a resident that said we weren't doing nothing. I think we're doing a lot. I think this is gonna be the best year that the residents have seen in Loxahatchee Groves.
I'd just like to, once again, encourage us to wait until we do the capital improvement budget. We don't need to be raising contingency. We need to get an answer on the road, on the gas tax money, so that we can intelligently make these decisions. If we have gas tax money, we've spent a good share of that on the North Road thing. So we need to maybe get the Financial Advisory Committee to take a look at this and see how much gas tax money is left before we start. And there are other things that are equally important that we equally like to see done. And I think the answer is we can wait till next meeting to get to that capital improvement budget.
Okay, any other council members? Okay, Mike?
Understanding that I'm saying this for the first time too, one of the other questions that I need to ask is, the expenditure of the funds to do the project and whether it's consistent with our own procurement code. We've got purchasing thresholds. And I've not had a chance to review, that's why I asked the question about if this is going to be done through our contract with the district, which we already have in place, which they do the work and reimburse, and it's already dedicated to the contractual system. That's fine, but if these are projects that we have to do, and we're responsible for, and if it's not there, we need to look at them and see whether this is something, because you may be fine to do it, but you may have to take an extra step on the procurement code, like waive bid or something like that. And I just, candidly, I haven't had a chance to look at that issue. I don't really want to cause a problem, but I haven't had a chance to look at that issue.
And I think it comes back to the problem we have of bringing things up, basically the night of a meeting, and trying to pass things without doing our homework. I mean, I think, personally, something Jim Rocket said a long time ago, and I think it's very doable the more I thought about it, is I envision a time coming very quickly where we will not need a town tax. We will not need the millage that we can charge, because we've got extra money. So why not put it back in the pockets of the people that used it to start? Let's reduce our taxes. I mean, the county keeps charging me more every year. So, I mean, I don't know how long, even with the Save Our Homes, I can afford to stay in Palm Beach County. I would love to stay here the rest of my life. But, so I mean, I would like to see us get to zero, millage in our town. Well, wouldn't that be something that we could brag about? Most of the people that wanted the incorporation was to keep it like it was. So I'm not in a rush to spend the money. I think we need to think it through, and we need to do it right, and spread it around where it benefits the most people. Keep our taxes low, and and you will always have residents that want more. I mean, if you ask enough people, we can pay for a tennis court and a basketball court down there someplace, and buy Vila and Son and build a big magnificent town hall, and I mean, we could spend the money easy.
Question, I could ask Ron that maybe we can modify the motion. What I understood the way you proposed, Ron, was that the piece that was relative to South and North F Road would be paid for out of the $150,000 that we already have funded?
Yeah.
If it's available.
If it's available. All right, assuming it's available, then if you would modify your motion, possibly just include the F Road piece, which really is just working with an existing contractor, working with existing funding, working with something that's already been done, so to speak, how we're doing this direction, if available.
I just want confirmation that you would reimburse us for the cost. We'll administer it for this.
Yeah, but he said that was going to come out of your part of the gas tax money?
The $150,000 agreement.
Okay.
Okay, but the motion wasn't that.
I just wanted, if we do that, separate the other two out and run, at least we maybe take one step and then take the other two and see if we can work on those and make a date relative to, I think, what you're hearing from the rest of the council.
Right, no, I'll get something, I'm happy. I'll make an amendment, hey, I'll make an amendment to the motion that, and F Road, first of all, F Road.
Okay, why don't you withdraw a motion and start a new motion, because it's getting so clouded.
I'll withdraw that motion.
Okay,
You get that, Jim?
I'll make a new motion.
there we go. And you all right with that? Jim, you all right with withdrawing your second?
Yes, I would like to withdraw.
That we take care of F Road. Clayton, this is north and south F Road? Is this north and south F Road?
Yes.
Okay. I make a motion that we let the water district take care of north and south F Road, and then we'll reimburse the water control district, but they'll take the job and take care of it.
That wasn't the
Clarify, please, so I can understand.
We already have an existing agreement in place, excuse me, this Cleats on the Industry Administrative Law, since you guys Water Control District. We already have an existing agreement in place with the town for $150,000 for the maintenance of district roads. We submit our costs on those roads throughout the year for reimbursement and provide that back up. This is a large project. It is part of the maintenance obligation of the district, as that road is a district road. But because it's 19,000 and change, I just wanted to make sure that it would be okay with you once we submitted that for reimbursement, that it would fall under that $150,000 highway. Okay.
Motion made.
Second.
Second, all right. I've got further discussion by council. I've got 3 public comment, and this is just F Road. We've got Dennis Lipp, Marge Herzog, and Nina Corning.
For the record, Dennis Lipp, 13402 North Road. Once upon a time, I did some researching back into the district's charter and their rules. And we have 2 former supervisors sitting there, and also John Ryan here in Cleveland. And I brought this up at a water control district meeting because we had on the northern end and the southern end of North F Road, there's some fairly heavy trucking operations. My next door neighbor right at the corner of F and North Road has triple axle dump trucks in and out, loaded to the top, and the turn into his driveway is all eroded away, and that started within months of F Road, North F Road going down. At the other end, we have another heavy-duty trucking operation where the same thing has occurred. And it says very clearly in the Water Control District's documents, anybody responsible for deteriorating a road is also responsible for fixing it. And I brought this up with Water Control District, and they said, well, we don't enforce that. So I was wondering if it would be, in interest of taking care of our assets that we have, the ocean road, whether or not this body could compel the district to enforce their own rules.
Thank you, Tim. Marge?
Marge Herzog, A Road. What you're doing right now is not legal. If it was reported to the Inspector General, I don't think you would be found operating too favorably. You have not publicly noticed this on your agenda, and you're bringing it up for a vote. And I don't think that's allowed. I think you need to table it, and I think you need to let the residents come and voice their opinion. You're also forgetting that money was supposed to be set aside from each of those roads that were paved and set into a separate fund by the Water Control District. when the repairs needed to be done. Well, where are these funds going? These roads are not being maintained by graders anymore, so their level of service is cut down, but yet they're still paying the same amount of money. So there's something wrong with this picture, or with the finances that are going on, and somebody needs to investigate it. So basically what I'm saying is, the gas tax should not even be an issue at this point. You need to go to the water control district, let them go into the funds that they should have been setting aside, and pay for it themselves.
Thank you. Nina?
Nina Cutting E-Road. I actually had more questions than comments, and that was one comment. I don't think F Road, especially the southern part, has been around for like 6 or 7 years, so I'm not quite sure what the holdup is, but of the ozone once it's been placed. But for all the other roads that have been done, all the other better roads, has there been money put aside, or has there been made a plan for maintenance in the future?
That's taken care of by
That is taken
what
care
the
of?
owners are paying.
By what the owners are paying. So this is different only because it wasn't
Right.
done at that time? Is that the only
Right,
reason why it's
it was
different?
not paid for by a referendum. The owners on those properties are not paying for it. The county put that road in.
That was my big question. And then just because a comment came up, I ventured to say that the F Road property close to North Road is not a big trucking operation. Just my opinion. Thank you.
All right, that's your name. And John Ryan?
John Ryan, 3508 A Road. Nina partially asked the question and clarified it, but Marge is just totally misconstruing the situation. F Road was paid for by the county. Neither the county nor the residents nor the water control district established any reserve for future maintenance. It's an entirely different situation on the current road segments. That money is being set aside in an escrow fund for the future maintenance, specifically the 7-year reflagging. So anyway, those comments on F Road were just out of place.
Well, I think our idea was more, if we saved the money not having to grade it, that was the comment, I believe what you were saying. All right, my question, regarding the legality of our vote.
Well, you're not procured, if this isn't a procurement process, it's below 25,000 for just F Road. And you already have a contract in place for the district to do this work for you through the interlocal agreement.
Okay.
The point though is well taken that anything that involves procurement, which is part of what we were talking about this evening, they are required to have notice of, and that's why we need to be careful about, the threshold of things that we kind of add on to the agendas. For that purpose, the county procurement code does require us to provide notice to the OIG when there is a procurement item on, and so I know top management, at least in the past, I believe they still do it, send them more agendas that can look at. So the refinement of the motion to take the project down to 19,000 and then to the work that we already got a contract with the water control district for, it complies. But I think, we get back to the issue about we need to, in the future, maybe bring it up, put on another agenda so that we can go through that step and comply with that set of rules.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? All right, passes 4-1. And moving on to public comments. I've got Dennis, I've got Lawrence Corning, and I've got Mark Herzog.
For the record, Dennis lived at 13402 North Road. Two things I'd like to ask you. This is really a town management thing. Is our website still under attack? Because it still states up there that we're, that you got to be careful using the website because of this, that, and the other. And I just wondering, this is the second time I brought this up in the past 2-3 months. I was just wondering if there's any direction from council to get this thing fixed, or are we just going to continue to have beware this website is not safe. Second thing, did you guys receive an agenda pack with just the minutes in it? Yes or no?
Just a minute.
Just the minutes? Okay. I think that's very, very cool. I mean, we had the town manager sit here under administrative update and had 5 items that could have been, elucidated, with one of them, just one of them. An intergovernmental coordination committee report. We used to get whole minutes of those in our agenda pack, so we could read things through and have questions prepared. So this has been a long meeting tonight. When I went through the agenda pack, I said, wow, all we've got in the backup is consent. And now we've been sitting here, going on 2.5, 3.5 hours. And we didn't have backup. There might have been more folks here tonight. So I would encourage the town council to direct staff to please put together agenda packs that match the meeting. I mean, when the town manager brings up, things like Palm Beach County School Board and changing, district lines, I think that's important. I think, that more than just a couple of people maybe knowing something about it because they might have seen it on a blog or in the newspaper. And then we get into, into the zoning maps and, how the county's zoning is different than what the town's zoning may be. I think that needs some backup. So you're not sitting there just, listening to it for the first time, and people in the audience aren't sitting here listening to it for the first time and completely lost. So we're not, this is, I think, being delayed. And I'm amazed to hear our new town management system is, sitting here hearing the same rhetoric that we heard back with the previous manager of now having a bucket list, having a pick list, or, other things. I think Lon Chu called it a punch list, on the PAC committee. So here we are. This town council, and probably residents as well, keep a lot of stuff on that. And I think that he has now recognized this and stepping up to the plate and said, no, I like his analogy to his plate being full and his cup running over. So I think that we really need to be careful as a town that we just don't scare people away with all of the things that we request that the town management do, because we got to really put a lid on things. And I think that coming up with these motions of that we've had here tonight, I think we would have had more turnout. We would have had better comment. You would have been better prepared if the agenda packs were at least honest. I don't not honest that somebody's trying to pull the wool over our eyes, but complete. So that we know what we're going to be discussing tonight. And the town manager certainly has complete control over what he's going to be talking about. 5 items. One of them was elucidated with nothing in the backup. Well, you can do something about it.
Lawrence Corey. Then we've got March. And Sharon.
Lawrence Green, I have two quick items. One is the Greenways Committee. You tasked them with coming up with a vision, and they would come to you, and then you would fund it. Concurrently, you have also tasked a grant writer, and you sort of had a Soviet committee in Bonn there, so that person was able to create the 400-page vision document very quickly, and it is now out for funding. So I just wanted to bring up to you that you have sort of an inherent conflict. So just so you're aware of it, you're going to be following that, right? So I think you ought to think about that. The item 2 sort of handed to the protocol. When we had our P&Z meeting, we had the applicant sitting right next to our town manager, and then just a step away was our city attorney. And I know it's a brand new town, and it's just, it's something we ought to just take a quick look at. Maybe we ought to have little seat assignments where the applicant would be sitting somewhere away from our staff. It's a little uncomfortable when you have, like, who knows what that thing is going to be a build at. You know, the high school is $90 million by the time they finish building this college, and then you have a shopping center. You're talking serious dollars, and the applicant is, normally when you're sitting next to somebody during one of these meetings, you chat and you laugh and whatever, but it just sends a funny message to people, and it's just something we ought to look at. Maybe in the future an applicant will have a seat somewhere designated to them that would be send a better message.
About the parking lot?
Well, no, I mean, and it's just something we can clean up just on the road to doing other things.
Thank you, Robert.
Maybe we just.
Okay. Mark?
Do I have a chance to address these comments, John? If I can,
You can. I was letting the public make the comments, so go ahead.
Okay.
Anyway, let's get.
On behalf of the management company, we follow our contract and we live with it every day. Now, Mr. Lipp is concerned because there was no agenda. But if you would look back at all your agendas, I try to give you very detailed reports telling you who, what, where, when, and why. Now, this last week, I had the Water District Board of Supervisors till 10:15, the Equestrian Committee till 10:30 on Tuesday, and then Mr. Lipp's board till 11:30 on Thursday. Now, I'm sorry, but, there aren't that many hours in a day to get these things done. These are all mandatory meetings. If you don't want me to attend them, then I can sit there and write glorious reports, and Mr. Lipp can be satisfied. I'm not really sure whether he was supporting me or whether he was attacking me, because he was all over the map there. But I'm surprised that I heard that from him. Now, secondly, Mr. Corning, at the P&Z meeting, there was a chair between the attorney and myself. Mr. Simon, that's who Mr. Corning is talking about, walks in and sat down. Now, I'm not the chair of police. I assume that there were no seats left, and that's why he sat there. I wasn't going to throw him out of that chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not attacking. I'm not attacking. And I realized how it happened. I realized he walked in and sat down. I'm just saying that we need to protect ourselves. We need to conduct ourselves in a fashion in which one would expect of us. And, I have no problem with our manager or our attorney. I'm just saying we need to set up the board.
Mark?
Mark Herzog, A Road. I was glad to see that the speed humps were finally being addressed by this board, and someone is listening to what the residents have been saying. I know there would have been a bigger turnout if we had known it was going to be on the agenda, but it is what it is. As way of announcement, the Adopt a Road is this Saturday. We have 77 National Honor Society kids coming, and we have a group of environmentalists from the H.L. Johnson School coming to help us. Anyone that can come and help organize and get these kids to their locations, it would be appreciated. Also on the 26th, at the LGLA meeting, we're going to have a group come in and talk about the wind farms that are going in out in the western communities. So if you can be there at the LGLA, see you then.
Sure.
Sharon Browning,
D Road, just an announcement and an invitation to anybody on May 3rd, Thursday at noon. It is National Day of Prayer. And once again, we are just going to have an opportunity to meet here out at the flagpole out here at noon for as however long it needs to go. It's usually just been a short amount of time, within 15 minutes. But whoever's there, we would welcome and just want to make that available to anybody.
What time was that again?
Noon.
That is
Yep,
May
May
3rd at noon. Yeah, it's like, all right, moving to town attorney, Mike.
No report.
Okay, all right, moving to town council members. Tom, let's start off.
Yes, one thing I would like to bring up is I would like to get back to I guess it was a dream that we had where we would have the regular council meeting on the first meeting of the month, and we would have any sort of workshop or developer issues dealt with on the second meeting of the month. And that has apparently gone awry, and I'd like to see it get back to that if it could. No blame on anybody, but if we could schedule that, if we could get some consensus toward that, I would be appreciative of that. But otherwise, thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for your support.
Okay, Ron.
I agree with Tom. I'd like to see the main council meeting first of the month, and if we have any workshops, make it the second part of the month. I prefer just one meeting a month, though. And thank all of you for coming and enduring.
Ryan.
Well, I like 3 meetings. No. I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and I'll leave it short with that.
Okay. Jim.
You know, it's tough having split personality. You say two different things, and I think you shouldn't. One comment I think needs to be made. One of the items we talked about tonight, as I recall, the school note was something that was sent to us on Monday. It would not be part of the agenda because we just got it Monday. So things like things that come up of late and the town manager wants to report to us an administrative update, I would want to know anything happened up to 5 o'clock the day of our meeting. So we actually got the item, but we didn't have it on the agenda. The other point is on our agenda, when we talk about things, we get into some things because they have to be part of the agenda item. The discussion we had tonight on Cut Up, and the discussion we had about a couple of different things. They just are natural spin-offs, and I would not want this council to be restricted to what we can talk about unless it's part of our agenda, which the agenda is what we hope to talk about. Hopefully get through it all. And it's our guide, you know, and we usually cover what's on the agenda. But if we have other things to talk about that are relative to the item on the agenda, we should not let that restrict. We don't have a script. You know, if I don't have a teleprompter out here telling me exactly what we can say, or speech, this is what we do. We discuss things as they come up, and if they're associated or linked. I agree with you 100%, as much as we can put on the agenda beforehand, things to notify the people that are issues, sure. But I don't think some of the things we talk about tonight that seem to be complained about were added to the agenda because it just came up as part of the discussion. I want us to keep us fluid that way. So that's the one side of the split personality. I just think that sometimes if comments are made, accusations are made, we need to answer them. Mark has been, I think, doing a super job. I had no problem with tonight's agenda. There was nothing in it that I needed more. I did not need more. And we have a report from the town manager. It's nice to have some backup and letters written and all, but you can certainly come and just tell us about the things that are going on. Especially if we're not taking action on any of the items. But I do appreciate what you're coming here. We had turnout had similar faces and all. And we had one new face here that was new for a while. We finally got Bill to get out here and visit us, so it's nice to see him. But we do thank him for coming.
Okay, and I want to thank you all for coming, and have a good evening. Motion to adjourn?
Good sign.
Can I use a black pen on that?
He's the only one that he recognized. I know I don't come out of it.